The Arcane Academy's primary mana testing chamber was a cavernous hall of polished obsidian and shimmering silver runes, where the air itself seemed to hum with latent power. Morning light filtered through stained glass windows depicting legendary mages of old, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the floor where 24 students stood in nervous anticipation. Among them, Kael Vance kept to the back, his threadbare academy robes, a hand-me-down from a charitable fund, hanging loosely on his slender frame. His fingers trembled slightly as he clutched a simple mana detection crystal, its surface cool and inert. Professor Alistair Thorne, a tall man with a severe face and robes embroidered with gold thread denoting his noble lineage, paced before the class. His voice echoed with condescending authority. "Today, we assess your foundational mana cores. This is not merely a test of strength, but of purity and control. Those who fail to meet the Academy's standards," he let the thread hang, his eyes sweeping over the students, lingering dismissively on Kael, "may find their futures limited." Kael's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew what was coming. Since enrolling a month ago, he'd been labeled the cripple, the boy with a mana core so weak it barely registered on preliminary scans. Whispers followed him through the marble corridors. How did he even get in? Probably some pity admission. My servant has more magical potential. The noble scions, children of wealthy families with generations of magical heritage, treated him with open contempt. Kael had hoped today might be different, that somehow his core had strengthened overnight, but the familiar dull ache in his chest told him otherwise. "We'll proceed in alphabetical order," Thorne announced, gesturing to a raised dais at the room's center. On it sat the mana-resonant sphere, a globe of clear crystal that glowed with internal light when touched by magical energy. "Vance, Kael, you're up first." A ripple of snickers spread through the class. Kael's cheeks flushed with heat. He hadn't expected to be called first. Usually, they saved him for last, as a punchline. Swallowing hard, he stepped forward, his boots clicking softly on the stone. He could feel every eye on him, the bored curiosity of some, the malicious glee of others. In the front row, Eric Blackwood, the class bully and son of a prominent duke, smirked and elbowed his friend, a beefy boy named Rorik. "Watch this, it'll be over in a second," Eric whispered, loud enough for Kael to hear. Kael climbed the 3 steps to the dais, his palms sweating. The sphere loomed before him, its surface smooth and cold. Professor Thorne stood nearby, arms crossed, a look of profound disinterest on his face. "Place your hand on the sphere and channel your mana, Vance. Let's see if you've made any progress." Taking a deep breath, Kael closed his eyes and focused inward. In his mind's eye, his mana core was a faint, sputtering ember, a pathetic flicker compared to the roaring furnaces he imagined his peers possessed. He willed energy toward his hand, feeling the familiar strain, the resistance as if pushing through thick mud. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a weak, pale blue light seeped from his fingertips into the sphere. It didn't glow. Instead, it produced a dim, sickly shimmer that lasted barely 3 seconds before fading entirely. The sphere's internal light remained unchanged, a testament to his failure. Silence hung for a heartbeat before the jeers erupted. "Pathetic," Eric called out, laughing. "My little sister's toy wand produces more light. I've seen dying fireflies with brighter cores," Rorik added, earning chuckles from others. "Honestly, Vance, are you even trying?" A girl's voice chimed in. Lysandra, a noble with silver hair and a perpetually haughty expression. "It's embarrassing to share a classroom with you." Kael's hand fell from the sphere, his shoulders slumping. Humiliation washed over him in a hot, prickling wave. He wanted to vanish, to sink through the floor and disappear. But as the insults washed over him, each one a sharp, public dagger, something strange happened. A faint, almost imperceptible notification flickered at the edge of his vision, visible only to him. Martyr's reversal activated. Public humiliation detected. Experience points gained, +50. Stat boost, +1 to resilience. Kael blinked, startled. This wasn't the first time he'd seen such messages. They'd started appearing a week ago, after a particularly harsh taunting session in the dining hall. At first, he'd thought he was hallucinating from stress, but the subtle changes in his body were real, a slight increase in stamina, a toughening of his skin. His curse, as he'd always called his weak core, seemed to hide a secret cheat. The more he was publicly shamed, the stronger he became. He didn't understand its origins. It felt like a dormant ability that had awoken upon his enrollment, but he'd begun to suspect it was tied to his mana core's peculiar nature. Enough, Professor Thorne said, though his tone held no real reprimand for the students. He eyed Kael with disdain. Result: mana core rating, insufficient. Vance, you have failed to meet the minimum threshold for continued study in advanced mana theory. This will be noted in your record. He made a mark on a floating parchment with a wave of his hand. Step down. Kael descended the dais, his head bowed. The insults continued as he returned to his place, but now, instead of pure despair, a spark of defiance ignited in his chest. He focused on the messages in his mind, replaying them. Plus 50 EXP, plus 1 resilience. It was a small boost, barely noticeable, but it was something. He thought, asterisk every laugh, every sneer, they're fueling me. Let them mock. I'll endure, asterisk. The rest of the test proceeded, each student showcasing varying degrees of talent. Eric Blackwood placed his hand on the sphere, and it erupted in a brilliant golden light, drawing impressed murmurs. Core rating, excellent, Thorne announced, smiling faintly. Lysandra produced a shimmering silver glow, earning a superior rating. Kael watched, his jaw tight. He noted their performances, storing away details. Eric's showy but slightly unstable output, Lysandra's precise control. In his mind, the Martyr's reversal log updated sporadically as occasional side comments were directed his way, adding tiny trickles of EXP. After the last student finished, a timid boy who managed an adequate rating, Professor Thorne addressed the class again. Today's results will determine your practical assignments. Those with higher ratings may access the restricted library sections. Those at the bottom, he glanced at Kael, will require remedial attention. Eric raised a hand, a sly grin on his face. Professor, perhaps Kael could use some hands-on training. You know, to toughen him up. Thorne considered this, tapping his chin. An interesting suggestion, Blackwood. Practical combat experience can indeed reveal hidden strengths or confirm weaknesses. He turned to Kael, his eyes glinting with something that might have been amusement. Vance, tomorrow, in the central arena during third period, you will engage in a public duel with Mr. Blackwood. It will be observed by this class and any other interested students. Consider it an opportunity to prove your mettle. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by excited whispers. A public duel? Against Eric? It was a death sentence, or at least a guarantee of brutal humiliation. Eric cracked his knuckles, looking delighted. I'll go easy on you, cripple. Promise. Kael felt a cold knot form in his stomach. A duel? In front of everyone? The thought sent fear coursing through him. Eric was not only magically gifted but also trained in physical combat. Yet, beneath the fear, that strange, stubborn spark flared again. The Martyr's reversal had activated from mere insults. What would a public beating trigger? The potential for growth was immense, but so was the pain. He met Eric's gaze, seeing the cruelty there, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He wouldn't back down. Very well, Thorne said. Class dismissed. Vance, stay behind. The other students filed out, many shooting Kael pitying or mocking looks. Eric clapped him on the shoulder as he passed, leaning close to whisper, I'll make sure it's a show everyone remembers. Then he was gone, his laughter echoing down the hall. When they were alone, Professor Thorne approached Kael, his expression unreadable. Vance, do you understand why I've arranged this? Kael shook his head, wary. To humiliate me further, sir? Thorne's lips thinned. The Academy has standards. Your presence here challenges those standards. This duel will serve as a lesson, to you and to others. Sometimes, failure must be made visible to reinforce success. He paused, studying Kael. You have a choice. You can forfeit now and accept probationary status with reduced privileges, or you can fight and likely be injured. Which will it be? Kael thought of the Martyr's reversal, of the tiny stat boost he'd gained today. If he forfeited, he'd avoid pain but gain nothing. If he fought, the humiliation would be intense, public, and potentially rewarding. He straightened his back, meeting Thorne's eyes. I'll fight, Professor. A flicker of surprise crossed Thorne's face, quickly masked. As you wish. Dismissed. Kael left the chamber, his mind racing. The corridor outside was empty, the sounds of other students fading in the distance. He leaned against a cool stone wall, breathing deeply. In the quiet, he pulled up his mental interface, a skill he'd discovered he could access by focusing. It displayed simple information. Name, Kael Vance. Level, 2, EXP, 150/200. Mana core, crippled, insufficient. Abilities, Martyr's Reversal, passive. Stats, Resilience 11, +1, others baseline. He'd gained a level since the messages started, and today's humiliation had pushed him closer to the next. The duel tomorrow, it would be a spectacle. He could already imagine the arena filled with jeering students, Eric's triumphant face. The fear returned, cold and sharp, but alongside it grew a grim determination. Let them all watch, he thought, clenching his fists. Asterisk, let them laugh. Every insult, every blow, I'll turn it into strength. Asterisk. As he walked toward his dormitory, a small, sparse room in the academy's least desirable wing, he rehearsed scenarios in his head. He had no combat training, no powerful spells. But he had his curse, and now his secret. He didn't know how far this ability could take him, but for the first time, he felt a sliver of hope. Tomorrow, he would step into the arena as the academy's cripple, and somehow he would endure. The chapter ends with Kael lying in his narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, the echoes of today's jeers still ringing in his ears, and the promise of tomorrow's duel heavy in the air. He closed his eyes, vowing silently, asterisk, I will survive this. And one day, I'll make them all see. Asterisk. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Arcane Academy's central courtyard, where the dueling arena stood like an ancient amphitheater of polished obsidian stone. Kael stood at the eastern entrance, his student robes feeling heavier than usual. The air hummed with anticipation, not the respectful quiet of academic observation, but the buzzing excitement of spectators gathering for a spectacle. Magical screens floated throughout the courtyard, their surfaces shimmering with enchanted light, ready to broadcast every moment to those who couldn't crowd the stone benches. Kael's fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the simple leather bracer on his left wrist. He had spent the night in restless contemplation, going over the mechanics of his Martyr's Reversal ability. Every insult, every mocking laugh, every condescending glance, they all fed into a hidden reservoir of power that only he could see. A translucent interface hovered in his peripheral vision, visible only to him. Martyr's Reversal active. Current spectators, 327. Potential experience multiplier, 3.2x. Humiliation threshold, medium. 327 people. Kael swallowed hard. Yesterday's mana test had drawn maybe 50 students. Today, the entire first-year cohort seemed to be here, along with upperclassmen who had heard rumors of the cripple's duel. Professor Thorne stood at the arena's edge, his stern face illuminated by the morning light. Beside him, Eric Blackwood stretched with casual arrogance, his noble lineage evident in the fine embroidery on his robes and the confident smirk that never left his lips. Remember, Kael, Thorne's voice carried across the arena, amplified by a minor acoustic spell. This duel is not about victory. It is about demonstrating perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. A lesson for all of you. The professor's words were a carefully crafted humiliation, framing Kael's inevitable loss as an educational exhibit. Kael felt his cheeks burn, but beneath the shame, a cold determination settled in his chest. He focused on the interface. Humiliation threshold, medium. Good. Let them watch. Let them laugh. Eric sauntered into the center of the arena, the obsidian floor reflecting his polished boots. Ready to take your beating, cripple? He called out, his voice dripping with mock concern. I'll try to make it quick. Wouldn't want to bore the audience. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kael saw familiar faces among them. Lysandra, the top of their class, watching with detached curiosity. Marcus, Eric's usual lackey, grinning like a fool, and dozens of others whose names he knew only from whispered insults. He took a deep breath and walked forward, his steps measured. The magical screen zoomed in on his face, capturing every flicker of anxiety. Begin, Thorne announced, and the arena's boundary shimmered with a containment ward to prevent stray spells from hitting spectators. Eric didn't wait. He raised a hand, and a bolt of crackling lightning shot from his fingertips, a basic shock bolt spell, but infused with enough mana to sting. Kael tried to dodge, but his weak mana core struggled to fuel his reflexes. The bolt grazed his shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through his body. He stumbled, and the crowd erupted in jeers. Experience gained, plus 150 XP. Stat boost, plus 1 dexterity. Spectator count, 415. Kael gritted his teeth. The pain was real, but so was the surge of energy that followed it. He could feel his body adapting, his senses sharpening slightly. Eric advanced, not bothering with complex spells. He wanted to show, "Is that all you've got?" Eric taunted, launching a series of minor arcane missiles. They weren't lethal, but they stung like wasps, striking Kael's arms, legs, chest. Kael raised his hands in a feeble attempt to block, but without a proper mana shield, he was defenseless. Each impact drew another wave of laughter from the stands. Experience gained, plus 320 XP. Stat boost, plus 2 constitution. Humiliation threshold, high. Kael's vision blurred with tears of pain and frustration, but he forced himself to stay standing. He remembered his vow, to endure, to let every insult fuel him. Eric closed in, his smirk widening. "Pathetic," he muttered, loud enough for the nearest magical screens to pick up. "You don't belong here. You're a stain on this academy." With a swift motion, Eric cast a gravity bind spell. Invisible forces wrapped around Kael's limbs, pulling him to his knees. The pressure was immense, crushing. Kael gasped, struggling against the weight. The crowd's noise grew louder. A cacophony of cheers for Eric, boos for Kael. He could see individual faces now. A girl covering her mouth as she giggled, a boy pointing and laughing with his friends. Experience gained, plus 500 XP. Stat boost, plus 3 strength. Spectator count, 502. Yield, Eric commanded, standing over him. "Admit you're worthless, and I'll end this." Kael shook his head, his voice a strained whisper. "No." Eric's eyes flashed with annoyance. He raised a foot and brought it down hard on Kael's back, not with mana, but with physical force. The impact drove the air from Kael's lungs. He collapsed face first onto the obsidian floor, the cold stone pressing against his cheek. The magical screens showed the scene in vivid detail. The noble's boot on the cripple's back, the crowd's roaring approval. Experience gained, plus 800 XP. New skill unlocked, pain absorption. Skill description, converts physical and magical pain into temporary durability. Current efficiency, 15%. A new sensation flooded Kael's body. The agony from Eric's attacks didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became a thick, resilient layer beneath his skin, like armor forged from suffering. He could feel it, a dull, throbbing power that hardened his muscles and bones. But he didn't move. He lay there, playing his part. Eric stepped back, brushing imaginary dust from his robes. "Enough," he declared to the crowd. "The cripple has learned his lesson." Professor Thorne approached, his expression unreadable. "The duel is over. Eric Blackwood is the victor. Kael, you may rise." Kael pushed himself up slowly, every movement aching. The pain absorption skill was working. He could stand without collapsing, though his body screamed in protest. He met Eric's eyes, and for a moment, he saw a flicker of surprise. Kael should have been broken, sobbing. Instead, he was silent, his gaze steady. "Return to your dormitory," Thorne said, his voice losing its amplified quality. "Rest. You will resume classes tomorrow." As Kael limped toward the arena's exit, the crowd's noise began to die down, replaced by scattered conversations and laughter. He kept his head low, but his mind was racing. The experience gains had been massive, over 1,700 XP in less than 10 minutes. His stats had improved across the board, and pain absorption. He could already feel its potential. If he could increase its efficiency, he might survive worse than this. He passed by the Headmaster's viewing box, a secluded balcony overlooking the arena. Headmaster Valerius stood there, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the dispersing crowd. Kael wouldn't have noticed him if not for a stray whisper caught on the edge of his enhanced hearing, a perk of his increased dexterity. "Keep the cripple around for morale," Valerius murmured to a hooded figure beside him. His voice was low, almost contemplative. "His suffering reminds the others of their own superiority." A useful tool, don't you think? The hooded figure nodded slightly, but said nothing. Kael froze for a second, his blood running cold. It wasn't an accident. His humiliation wasn't just cruelty, it was policy. The headmaster saw him as a tool, a living lesson in failure. The realization hit him like a physical blow, sharper than any of Eric's spells. He quickened his pace, not daring to look back. As he reached the shadowed archway leading out of the courtyard, he glanced at his interface one last time. Level up, 5-7. Total experience, 2, 150/3,000. New skills, pain absorption, level 1. Spectator peak, 502. Humiliation peak, extreme. Kael leaned against the cold stone wall, catching his breath. The pain was still there, but it was distant now, muffled by the new skill. He thought of Valerius's words. A useful tool. A bitter smile touched his lips. Let them think that. Let them believe he was just a cripple to be pitted or mocked. Every insult, every orchestrated humiliation, it was all fuel. And he was just beginning to learn how to burn it. In the distance, he could still hear echoes of laughter from the courtyard. He closed his eyes, committing the sound to memory. Today, he had been beaten. Today, he had been a spectacle. But as he walked away, his steps grew steadier, his back straighter. The arena's echo would linger, but so would his resolve. And deep within, the power born from shame stirred, hungry for more. The morning after the duel with Eric, Kael woke in the infirmary with a clarity that cut through the lingering ache in his bones. Sunlight filtered through the high, arched windows of the Arcane Academy's medical wing, casting long shadows across the sterile white sheets. His body was a tapestry of bruises, purple and yellow blooms across his ribs, a swollen lip, and a stiffness in his joints that made every movement a minor agony. But beneath the physical pain, something new thrummed within him, a cold, steady pulse of power. He lay still, replaying the previous day in his mind. The jeers of the crowd, Eric's mocking laughter, the way the magical screens had magnified his every flinch and stumble. And then, the whispers, Headmaster Valerius's voice, low and calculating, about keeping him as a morale tool. Kael's fists clenched under the sheets. They thought him broken, a plaything for their amusement. But with each insult, each humiliating blow, he had felt it, a surge of energy, like a dam cracking open inside his weak mana core. His ability, which he'd privately dubbed Martyr's Reversal, wasn't just random. During the duel, he'd noticed it. The more spectators watched, the brighter the notifications flashed in his mind's eye. Experience points flowing in like a river, stat boost stacking, and that new skill, pain absorption, unlocking at the peak of his agony. It was as if the collective scorn of the audience was fuel, and his shame the spark. "Awake, are you?" A nurse with a pinched face approached, her robes rustling. "Professor Thorn wants to see you in his office." "Now." Kael nodded, swinging his legs off the bed. The movement sent a sharp twinge through his side, but he gritted his teeth. As he dressed in his simple student robes, patched and faded compared to the silks of the noble science, he focused inward. A translucent screen, visible only to him, hovered in his vision. Level 5, up from 3. Mana core strength, E, up from F. Skills, pain absorption active. Experience, 850 out of 1000. He'd leveled twice from that single duel. A slow smile touched his lips. If public humiliation was the key, then he would embrace it. Professor Thorn's office was a cluttered space, smelling of old parchment and ozone. Shelves groaned under the weight of spellbooks, and a large crystal orb on the desk glowed with faint, swirling lights. Thorn, a stern man with a beard like gray wire, didn't look up as Kael entered. "Sit," he said, his voice flat. "The headmaster has decided to keep you enrolled, despite your inadequacies. But there are conditions." Kael took the offered chair, his back straight. "Conditions, sir? You will serve as a demonstration subject for first-year mana control classes," Thorn said, finally meeting his eyes. There was no malice there, only weary resignation. "Your weak core makes you ideal for showing what not to do. It's a public service, of sorts. Volunteers are needed, and you've shown a tolerance for embarrassment." Kael's heart beat faster. More spectators, more opportunities. He kept his face neutral, a mask of submissive acceptance. "I understand, Professor. I'll do my best." Thorn sighed, as if disappointed by the lack of fight. Very well. Your first session is this afternoon in the Grand Lecture Hall. 200 students. Don't be late. As Kael left the office, the corridors of the academy buzzed with life. Noble students in fine robes clustered in groups, their laughter sharp and carrying. He caught snippets of conversation. Did you see the cripple yesterday? I thought Eric would break him in half. Worthless, even as a punching bag. Kael kept his head down, but inside, he was calculating. 200 spectators. That was fewer than the duel's 500, but still substantial. He needed to test his theory, to see if the rewards scaled with the audience size. The Grand Lecture Hall was a vast, circular chamber with tiered seating rising steeply toward a domed ceiling painted with constellations that glimmered with enchanted light. At the center stood a raised platform, where Professor Thorn waited beside a mana-measuring crystal, a tall, prismatic stone that glowed in response to magical energy. Kael stood before it, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Today, Thorn announced, his voice amplified by a whisper spell that carried to every corner. We will demonstrate the consequences of poor mana core development. Kael, here, possesses a core rated E-, one of the weakest on record. Watch closely as he attempts a basic mana channeling exercise. A ripple of laughter spread through the hall. Kael saw familiar faces. Eric, smirking in the front row with his friends. Other nobles leaning forward with eager, cruel smiles. He took a deep breath, focusing on the crystal. This was it. A controlled experiment in humiliation. Begin, Thorn said. Kael raised his hands, mimicking the gestures he'd seen in textbooks. He pushed with his mana core, feeling the feeble trickle of energy. The crystal flickered, a pale, sickly yellow, then died. A chorus of jeers erupted. Pathetic, someone shouted. Can't even light a candle. Kael's cheeks burned, but inwardly, he watched his mental screen. Notifications flashed. Plus 50 experience. Public humiliation, minor failure. Mana control +1. The rewards were smaller than during the duel. Less intense shame, fewer spectators. But they were there. He needed to amplify it. Again, Thorn said, his tone bored. Kael deliberately fumbled the gestures, letting his hands tremble. He channeled a burst of mismanaged mana, causing the crystal to emit a sputtering spark that fizzled out with a pathetic pop. The laughter grew louder, more derisive. Plus 80 experience. Public humiliation, moderate failure. Stamina +2. He was getting the hang of this. Over the next hour, Thorn put him through a series of exercises. Levitating a feather, it twitched and fell. Summoning a light orb, it flickered like a dying firefly. And attempting a basic shield spell, it shattered at a touch. Each failure was met with catcalls and mock applause. Kael leaned into it, exaggerating his struggles, letting his frustration show. He fell to his knees at one point, panting dramatically, and the hall roared with delight. By the end, his experience bar had climbed to 950/1000. His stats had seen minor boosts across the board. But more importantly, he'd confirmed it. The larger the audience and the more intense the public shame, the greater the rewards. It was a brutal, ironic arithmetic, his worth measured in scorn. As the session concluded, Thorn dismissed the students with a wave. Remember this lesson. Without a strong core, you are nothing but a spectacle. The crowd filed out, still laughing. Eric paused on his way, leaning close to Kael. You're even worse than I thought, cripple. At least in the duel, you put up a fight. Here, you're just a joke. Kael met his eyes, saying nothing. Inside, a notification chimed. Plus 100 experience. Personal insult from Tormentor. Level up. 6. New skill unlocked. Karma's Ledger. He staggered slightly, as if weakened, and Eric laughed before striding away. Alone in the emptying hall, Kael focused on the new skill. A mental ledger unfolded, a vast, ethereal book bound in dark leather. Its pages glowed with entries, each one a record of an insult, a slight, a moment of humiliation. He could see them all. Asterisk Eric, you're a stain on this academy. Duel, day 14, asterisk. Asterisk Professor Thorn, inadequate. Office, today, asterisk. Asterisk unknown student, worthless. Lecture hall, today, asterisk. Hundreds of entries, dating back to his first day at the academy. But as he scanned them, details emerged, not just the words, but context. With Eric's entry, he saw a flicker of insecurity, a memory of Eric cheating on a mana theory exam, his hands shaking as he hit a crib sheet. With Thorn, there was a hint of resentment, a passed-over promotion, a bitterness toward the headmaster. Karma's ledger wasn't just a log, it was a map of weaknesses. Every insult carried a fragment of the tormentor's own fears, secrets, and shames. Kael's breath caught. He could use this, track their flaws, turn their cruelty back on them. He stood in the silent hall, the last of the daylight fading through the high windows. His body ached, his pride was in tatters, but a cold fire burned in his chest. They thought they were breaking him. Instead, they were forging him into something they couldn't imagine. Every jeer, every laugh, every condescending glance, it was all fuel. And with Karma's ledger, he now had the means to make them pay. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. Let them humiliate him. Let them gather and mock. He would endure it all, hoarding the power they gave him. And when the time came, he would open the ledger and read back their own stories to them, in front of the whole world. He left the lecture hall, his steps steady despite the pain. The corridors were quiet now, echoing with the ghosts of laughter. In the distance, he heard Headmaster Valerius's voice, giving a speech about academy pride. Kael didn't flinch. He had a new purpose. Seek out the shame. Embrace the spectacle. And with each public failure, he would grow stronger, until the day he could stand before them all, not as a cripple, but as a judge. That night, in his sparse dorm room, Kael pored over the ledger. He traced the entries, memorizing details. Eric's cheating, Thorn's bitterness, a noble girl's secret fear of fire magic. It was a web of vulnerabilities, and he held every thread. As he drifted into an exhausted sleep, his last thought was of the grand tournament he'd heard whispers about, a televised event with thousands of spectators. The ultimate stage for humiliation, and his ultimate opportunity. The cripple was learning to count his blessings and insults, and the ledger was just beginning to fill. The summons came at dawn, delivered by a stone-faced academy guard who didn't even bother to look Kael in the eyes. The parchment bore the headmaster's official seal, a golden phoenix clutching a mana crystal, and contained only 3 terse lines. Report to the grand auditorium at noon. Formal disciplinary proceedings. Attendance mandatory. Kael's fingers trembled slightly as he held the parchment, not from fear, but from anticipation. The grand auditorium seated 5,000. If the proceedings were televised through the Academy's scrying crystals, the audience could swell to tens of thousands across the city. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with dread, but with a dark, hungry excitement. This was exactly what he needed. He spent the morning preparing, not by polishing arguments or rehearsing defenses, but by mentally cataloging every humiliation he'd endured. The memory of Eric's sneering face during yesterday's demonstration session flashed in his mind. The jeers of 200 students still echoed in his ears. And now, the headmaster himself was about to add to the ledger. Karma's ledger, the skill he'd unlocked just yesterday, glowed faintly in his mind's eye. It had grown thicker overnight, its pages filled with names, dates, and insults. But more importantly, it had begun revealing glimpses of weaknesses. Professor Alaric's secret gambling debts, Eric's hidden fear of fire magic, even the headmaster's. But that entry remained frustratingly vague, obscured by powerful wards. Still, Kael knew. Today would fill more pages. At 11:30, he dressed in his academy uniform for what he suspected would be the last time. The blue robe felt heavier than usual, the silver trim tarnished by months of neglect. He ran a hand over the fabric, remembering his first day. The hope, the promise, the crushing disappointment when his mana core registered as defective. Today, that defect would become his greatest strength. The walk to the grand auditorium was a gauntlet. Students lined the pathways, their whispers sharp as knives. "Look, it's the cripple," a girl from his mana theory class giggled to her friend. "Heard he's getting expelled," a boy from the noble dorm said loudly. "About time. He's been dragging down our rankings. My father says they should have never admitted commoners with weak cores," another added, not bothering to lower his voice. Kael kept his head down, but his lips curved in a faint, private smile. Each insult was a gift. He could feel the energy building within him, a low hum beneath his skin. Martyr's reversal was already stirring, hungry for more. When he reached the auditorium's massive bronze doors, two guards fell into step beside him. They didn't touch him, but their presence was clear. He was being escorted, not invited. The doors swung open with a resonant groan. Inside, the scale took his breath away. The grand auditorium was a marvel of arcane architecture. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles toward a domed ceiling painted with constellations that actually moved. At the center stood a raised platform, the tribunal stage, flanked by three towering scrying crystals that would broadcast the proceedings to every common room, tavern, and public square in the city. And every seat was filled. Students packed the lower tiers, their blue uniforms creating a sea of muted color. Faculty occupied the middle sections in their more varied robes. The upper balconies held visiting dignitaries, parents, and curious citizens who'd paid for admission. Kael's eyes swept the crowd. Thousands, maybe even the full 5,000. And the scrying crystals were already active, their surfaces shimmering with captured light. His pulse quickened. So many witnesses. The guards led him down the central aisle. Every eye followed him. Whispers swelled into a low roar. He caught fragments. Disgrace. Waste of resources. Should have been gone months ago. He climbed the steps to the tribunal stage. The platform was bare except for a single wooden stool. No table, no chair, just that humble stool. A deliberate choice, he realized, to emphasize his lowly status. At the front of the stage sat Headmaster Thaddeus Vance on an ornate, throne-like chair. The man was in his 60s, with silver hair swept back from a stern face and eyes the color of winter sky. He wore deep crimson robes edged in gold, the official garb for disciplinary proceedings. To his left sat Professor Alaric, looking uncomfortable, and to his right, Magistrate Alara from the City Council, her expression unreadable. Kael of the Lowtown District, Headmaster Vance's voice boomed, amplified by magic to fill the vast space. You stand before this tribunal accused of persistent failure to meet the Arcane Academy's standards. Your mana core remains at the lowest measurable tier after 8 months of training. You have consistently scored in the bottom percentile of every examination. You have become a distraction to your peers and a drain on Academy resources. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The crowd murmured agreement. Kael stood perfectly still. Inside, he was counting. Every pair of eyes on him felt like a weight, but also like fuel. He could feel Martyr's reversal awakening, a warmth spreading from his core. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Magistrate Alara asked, her tone neutral. Kael met her gaze. He'd prepared for this moment, not with pleas or excuses, but with silence. He shook his head slowly. A ripple of disapproval ran through the crowd. No defense, someone shouted from the student section. He doesn't even care. Headmaster Vance's eyes narrowed slightly. Your lack of effort to improve is noted. But this tribunal is not here to judge your potential. We are here to determine whether you belong at this institution at all. He gestured, and one of the scrying crystals flared to life, projecting an image above the stage. Kael's academic record. Mana capacity, Tier 1, deficient. Combat practicals, failed. Theory exams, 42% average. A chorus of jeers erupted. Look at those numbers. Eric's voice carried from the front row. Kael didn't turn, but he could picture the smug expression. My little sister could do better, and she's 8. Laughter followed. Kael closed his eyes for a second. The humiliation was a physical thing now, a pressure against his skin. And with it came the response. Martyr's reversal surged, flooding his veins with energy. A notification shimmered at the edge of his vision. Experience plus 500. Strength plus 2. Wisdom plus 1. Spectators, 5, 200 plus. He almost gasped. 500 experience from a single insult? And the stat boosts. He'd never gained more than 1 point at a time before. This record, Headmaster Vance continued, is not merely poor. It is an embarrassment. The Arcane Academy was founded on principles of excellence. We train the future leaders of our kingdom, the mages who will defend our borders and advance our civilization. To allow someone with your limitations to remain among our ranks tarnishes that legacy. He rose from his chair, his crimson robes swirling. Therefore, after careful consideration, this tribunal has reached a verdict. The entire auditorium fell silent. Even the moving constellations on the ceiling seemed to pause. Kael of the Lowtown District, Vance's voice dropped, becoming colder, sharper. You are hereby expelled from the Arcane Academy, effective immediately. Your student status is revoked. Your access to academy grounds, libraries, and resources is terminated. You will surrender your uniform and identification before leaving these premises. He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Kael's. You are a stain on this academy's honor. Your presence has dragged down the standards we hold sacred. May your departure serve as a lesson to others. Weakness has no place here. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Then the reaction came, not just from the crowd, but from within Kael himself. A wave of shame crashed over him, hot, choking, unbearable. It was the public declaration of his worthlessness, broadcast to thousands, etched into official record. He could feel every eye on him, every judgment, every pitying or scornful thought. His cheeks burned, his hands clenched at his sides, and Martyr's reversal exploded. It wasn't the gentle warmth from earlier. It was a conflagration. Energy roared through him, so intense he staggered back a step. Notifications flashed in rapid succession, overlapping, glowing brighter than he'd ever seen. Experience plus 10,000. Level up. Level 7. Level up. Level 8. Level up. Level 9. Strength plus 10. Dexterity plus 8. Constitution plus 12. Intelligence plus 6. Wisdom plus 9. New skill unlocked. Humiliation's mantle, passive, converts public shame into a temporary defensive barrier. New skill unlocked. Scorn's echo, active, reflects a portion of psychic damage from insults back at the source. Karma's ledger updated. Entry for Headmaster Thaddeus Vance, stain on the Academy's honor. Weakness revealed. Obsession with legacy. Fear of being surpassed. The world seemed to slow. Kael's senses sharpened unbearably. He could hear individual heartbeats in the crowd, see the dust motes dancing in the light beams from the crystals, feel the subtle vibrations of the magic amplifying the proceedings. His body thrummed with power. His mana core, once weak and flickering, now blazed like a miniature sun within him. He had jumped 3 levels in seconds. His stats had nearly doubled, and the Headmaster's weakness was now laid bare in Karma's ledger. Obsession with legacy. Fear of being surpassed. Kael stored that knowledge away, a weapon for later. But outwardly, he showed none of this. He let his shoulders slump. He bowed his head, playing the part of the broken cripple one last time. Guards, Headmaster Vance said, his voice returning to its normal volume. See him out. Ensure he returns his academy belongings. 2 guards moved forward, their armor clanking. They gripped Kael's arms, not roughly, but firmly. As they turned him toward the aisle, the crowd found its voice again. Good riddance. Finally, go back to whatever gutter you crawled from. Eric's voice cut through the noise once more. Don't come begging when you're starving on the streets, cripple. More laughter, more insults. Each one was a gift. Kael could feel the energy still flowing into him, though slower now, the initial surge tapering off. His stats continued to glow in his perception, solidifying at their new heights. As the guards marched him down the aisle, he kept his head down, but his eyes were open. He watched the faces blur past, sneering, pitying, indifferent. He memorized them. Every one of them was a contributor to his strength now. At the doors, one guard shoved a rough sack into his hands. Your personal effects. Change out of the uniform. Now, they pushed him into a small antechamber. Kael stripped off the blue robe, folded it neatly, and placed it on a bench. He pulled on his old clothes from the sack, plain trousers and a worn tunic, the fabric thin from many washings. The contrast was stark, from academy student to commoner in minutes. When he emerged, the guards didn't touch him again. They simply pointed to the main gates, visible at the end of the long pathway. Leave, and don't come back. Kael walked. The pathway felt different under his feet, lighter. His body moved with a new grace, muscles responding with precision he'd never known. He could feel the humiliation's mantle skill already active, a faint, shimmering barrier just above his skin, woven from the shame of the trial. It would dissipate in a few hours, but for now, it was a tangible reminder of what he'd gained. At the gates, he paused and looked back. The Arcane Academy's spires pierced the sky, proud and unassailable. The grand auditorium loomed behind him, its crystals still glowing with the aftermath of the broadcast. He smiled then, a real smile, small and cold. They thought they had broken him. They thought they had cast out their weakest link. They had no idea they had just unleashed their greatest threat. He turned and walked through the gates, into the city beyond. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear tavern chatter, people discussing the trial, mocking the expelled cripple. Let them talk, he thought. Let them all talk. Every word was another step on his path to power, and he had just taken a giant leap. The heavy iron gates of Arcane Academy clanged shut behind Kael with a finality that echoed through the misty dawn. He stood alone on the cobblestone road, the expulsion decree crumpled in his fist, the ink still damp from Headmaster Vance's signature. The televised trial had ended hours ago, but the jeers of the crowd still rang in his ears, a symphony of humiliation that now thrummed through his veins as power. He didn't look back. Instead, he turned his face toward the Whispering Woods, a dense forest that bordered the Academy's eastern grounds. Legends said it was haunted by ancient spirits, but to Kael, it promised sanctuary. His feet carried him away from the spires and towers, each step crunching on fallen leaves as the sun began to bleed gold through the canopy. By midday, he'd reached a clearing deep within the woods, where a small stream cut through moss-covered stones. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Kael dropped his meager pack, containing only a change of clothes, a waterskin, and the tattered student robe he'd been allowed to keep, and sank to his knees. For the first time since the trial, he let himself breathe. His mind replayed the events. Headmaster Vance's voice, amplified by magical broadcast. Kael is a cripple, a stain on this institution's honor. The sea of faces in the grand auditorium, some pitying, most mocking. The guards' rough hands on his shoulders as they dragged him out. And beneath it all, the silent, glorious surge of his martyr's reversal ability. He could still feel it, a warmth in his core, like embers fanned into flame. Kael closed his eyes and focused inward. A translucent screen materialized in his vision, visible only to him. Name, Kael. Level, 9, 3 from expulsion. Mana core, weak, E-grade. Abilities asterisk. Martyr's reversal, passive. Gains EXP and stats from public humiliation. Karma's ledger, log of all injustices, reveals weaknesses. Humiliation's mantle, active. Converts shame into temporary defense boost. Scorn's echo, active. Channels mockery into sonic attack. He smiled, a bitter twist of his lips. The Academy had thought to break him, but they'd only poured fuel on a fire they couldn't see. His weak mana core, the source of all his torment, still pulsed faintly, but around it, a new energy swirled, born from every insult, every laugh, every condescending glance. Time to test this, he murmured to the empty clearing. Kael rose and faced a gnarled oak tree, its bark scarred by time. He recalled the duel from Chapter 2, where the class bully, Rylan, had beaten him bloody while the entire first-year cohort watched. The memory stung, but he leaned into it, letting the shame wash over him. He raised a hand, focusing on the sensation of helplessness, the heat in his cheeks as Rylan's friends cheered. Humiliation's mantle, he whispered. A shimmering, translucent shield of pale light erupted around him, flickering with faint echoes of laughter and sneers. It felt like wearing his own disgrace as armor. Kael stepped forward and slammed his fist into the oak tree. The shield absorbed the impact, vibrating with the force, and the tree shuddered, leaves raining down. He'd expected pain, but there was none, just a cool, resilient barrier. He held the mantle for a full minute before it dissipated, leaving him panting. The skill drained mental energy, but it was manageable. Next, he turned to Scorn's echo. He thought of Professor Alaric, who'd failed him on the mana test in Chapter 1 with a dismissive wave. Worthless, the man had said, and the class had erupted in giggles. Kael channeled that memory, letting it boil in his chest. He opened his mouth, and instead of a shout, a wave of distorted sound burst forth, a cacophony of jeers and taunts, amplified and focused. It struck a cluster of rocks by the stream, shattering them into dust. The echo lingered in the air, a ghost of ridicule given form. Kael sank to the ground, sweat beading on his forehead. These skills were powerful, but raw. He needed control. Over the next week, he trained relentlessly. Dawn till dusk, he practiced in the clearing, using memories as fuel. He learned that humiliation's mantle could be shaped, concentrated on his arms for blocking, or spread thin for overall protection. Scorn's echo could be directed in a cone or a pinpoint blast, depending on how he focused the memory. But it was exhausting. Each use dredged up painful moments, and by the third day, Kael found himself trembling after a session, his mind awash with fragments of the past. He sat by the stream, splashing cold water on his face, when a new idea struck him. What if he could create skills beyond those unlocked by leveling? The Martyr's reversal had always been reactive, but perhaps he could shape it. He spent an afternoon meditating, sifting through Karma's ledger. The log scrolled in his mind, endless entries of slights and injustices. He focused on a specific one, the time Rylan had tripped him in the cafeteria, spilling soup on his robe while a dozen nobles laughed. The humiliation had been sharp, public, and petty. Kael imagined channeling that moment not as a shield or echo, but as a weapon of pure retaliation. He stood, clenched his fists, and poured the memory into his palms. Mockery blast, he growled, naming it as he willed it into being. A sphere of condensed, dark energy formed between his hands, swirling with faint, whispering voices, snippets of that day's taunts. He hurled it at a fallen log. It struck silently, but where it hit, the wood didn't just break. It seemed to wither, as if the very essence of ridicule had sapped its strength. The log crumbled into rot. Kael stared, heart pounding. He'd done it, created a new skill by synthesizing his ability with his will. Emboldened, he worked on another. He recalled the expulsion trial, the collective shame of thousands watching him be branded a disgrace. This time, he envisioned a defensive skill that turned humiliation into a barrier. Shame's shield, he whispered, and a dome of faint, gray light enveloped him, tougher and more persistent than humiliation's mantle. It lasted longer, too, fed by the magnitude of that memory. By the end of the second week, Kael had refined Mockery Blast and Shame Shield into reliable techniques. His level hadn't increased. Martyr's reversal only triggered from fresh, public humiliation, but his control had deepened. He could now cycle through skills with fluidity, his body adapting to the strange energy that flowed from his core. It was on a cool evening, as he gathered berries by the stream, that he heard voices. He froze, melting into the shadows behind a thicket. Two figures in Academy Scout uniforms, junior students on patrol, passed by, their conversation carried on the breeze. Grand tournament next month, one said, a girl with braided hair. Headmaster Vance is offering a huge prize, a seat on the Arcane Council's junior division. Yeah, and everyone's buzzing about it. The other, a lanky boy, replied. Even the nobles are nervous. I heard Rylan's been training nonstop since that cripple got expelled. Thinks he can win. Kael's breath caught. The grand tournament. He'd heard whispers of it before, but never paid attention. It was an annual event where students and external contenders battled in magical duels, broadcast across the kingdom. Public. Televised. A stage where humiliation could be served on a platter. The scouts moved on, their voices fading. Kael emerged from hiding, his mind racing. The tournament was perfect. He could enter anonymously, face his tormentors, and use their own mockery against them. Every match would be a spectacle, fueling his growth. And with Karma's ledger, he could expose their secrets, turning their pride to ash. But he couldn't go as Kael the cripple. He needed a new identity. That night, by a small fire, he pondered it. The flames cast dancing shadows on the trees. He thought of his ability, Martyr's reversal. It was born from suffering, from enduring shame for power. A name came to him, whispered by the forest's rustle, the Martyr. He spent the next day crafting a mask. Using a piece of smooth bark from a silver birch, he carved it with careful strokes of a sharp stone. It was simple, covering the upper half of his face, with narrow eye slits and no mouth, painted with charcoal to a matte black. When he tied it on with strips of cloth, his reflection in the stream showed a stranger, anonymous, imposing, a blank slate ready to be filled with vengeance. As he adjusted the mask, Karma's ledger flickered in his mind, showing an entry from the trial. Headmaster Vance's weakness, obsession with legacy. The tournament would be his chance to strike at that, to unravel the schemes that had made him a pawn. Kael packed his few belongings, the mask tucked safely in his robe. He looked once more at the clearing, now scarred by his training, shattered rocks, withered logs, the oak tree dinted from his blows. This place had been his crucible, where shame had been forged into strength. He turned toward the academy, invisible behind his mask. The grand tournament awaited, and with it, a comeback born from the very humiliation they'd heaped upon him. His steps were silent on the forest path, but inside, a storm brewed, quiet, patient, and utterly relentless. The Arcane Academy's grand tournament arena loomed before Kael like a monument to everything that had broken him. 3 months had passed since his expulsion, but the towering obsidian spires and glowing mana crystal banners still made his chest tighten with remembered shame. Today, however, the feeling was different, a simmering anticipation that warmed the cold knot in his stomach. He stood at the registration desk in the competitor's pavilion, a temporary structure of enchanted canvas that shimmered with illusion magic to appear as marble. Around him, mages in elaborate robes and armored warriors polished their weapons, their laughter and boasts filling the air with competitive energy. Kael wore simple, dark traveler's clothes, his face hidden beneath the black mask he'd crafted in the Whispering Woods. It was featureless save for 2 narrow eye slits, a void that swallowed the light. Name and affiliation? The registrar asked without looking up, her quill poised over a scroll that glowed with recording spells. The Martyr, Kael said, his voice altered by a subtle vibration of mana, a trick he'd perfected during his training. No affiliation. The registrar glanced up, her eyes narrowing at the mask. Unusual, but the tournament rules allow anonymous entrants if they pass the mana verification. She gestured to a crystal orb on the desk. Place your hand here. We need to confirm you have at least Tier 1 combat capability. Kael's fingers twitched. The last time he'd touched a verification orb, it had barely glimmered, sparking the laughter that still echoed in his nightmares. But now, he laid his palm on the cool surface. Instead of pushing his weak mana core, he channeled a trickle of power from Humiliation's mantle, the skill that wrapped his failures around him like armor. The orb flared with a deep, bruised purple light, then settled into a steady silver glow. Tier 3, the registrar said, eyebrows raised. Acceptable. You'll be in the preliminary bracket. First match starts in 1 hour, Arena 3. She handed him a token that hummed with location magic. Don't be late, Martyr. The crowds hate waiting. As Kael turned away, he caught a familiar voice from across the pavilion. Look at this one, hiding behind a mask like a coward. Probably some noble's bastard afraid to show his face. Kael's breath hitched. He knew that voice, smug, nasal, perpetually dripping with condescension. Aldrich Vance, a minor noble's son who'd been among the first to trip Kael in the hallways, who'd coined the nickname Mana Cripple that spread through the academy like poison. Aldrich was preening before a group of younger students, his academy robes embroidered with his family's crest, a silver hawk. He hadn't changed, still the same sharp features, the same habit of flicking his hair when he spoke. Who's he fighting first? One of the younger students asked. A nobody called the Martyr. Aldrich sneered, glancing at a tournament bracket floating in the air. Probably some peasant who got lucky with a mana surge. I'll have him on his knees before the first spell completes. The group laughed, and Kael felt the old heat rise in his cheeks. But beneath it, something colder stirred. In his mind, Karma's ledger unfurled, a spectral book only he could see. Pages flipped to an entry from over a year ago. Asterisk Aldrich Vance, Hall of Elements, 3rd bell. Tripped Kael during practical exam. Called him cripple before Professor Thorne. Witnesses, 12 students. Humiliation value, moderate. Associated secret, cheated on final transmutation exam by bribing a proctor, asterisk. Kael's lips curved behind the mask. Oh, this would be perfect. Arena 3 was one of the smaller competition grounds, but small was relative at the Arcane Academy. It still seated 500 spectators in tiered stone benches that curved around a circular combat stage 50 feet across. The air crackled with ambient mana from the barrier spells that protected the audience, and the scent of ozone and excited sweat filled Kael's nostrils as he stepped from the preparation tunnel. The crowd's murmur washed over him, a sea of faces, some bored, some eager, all here for spectacle. He spotted Academy students in their blue robes, nobles in silks, and commoners who'd saved for months to buy tickets. Every pair of eyes was a potential fuel source for Martyr's reversal. Kael's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with hunger. Across the stage, Aldrich was already posing, one hand on his hip, the other twirling a wand of polished yew. Finally decided to show Mask Boy, he called, his voice amplified by the arena's acoustics. I was starting to think you'd run off to cry somewhere. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kael felt it like a physical touch, a prickling along his skin that seeped into his core. His mana, usually sluggish, stirred in response. Humiliation detected, a silent part of his mind noted. Asterisk spectators, 517. Intensity, low. Calculating bonus. Asterisk he pushed the notification aside, focusing on the present. The referee, a stern-faced Professor Kael didn't recognize, raised a hand. Combatants, this is a standard duel until surrender or incapacitation. No lethal spells. Begin on my mark. He looked between them. 3, 2, 1, begin. Aldrich didn't wait. He snapped his wand forward, and a bolt of crackling lightning shot toward Kael. A basic shock bolt, but enhanced with showy sparks meant to impress the crowd. It was fast, but to Kael's eyes, trained by months of fighting forest wraiths and his own demons, it moved like honey. Kael didn't dodge. He let it hit him square in the chest. The electricity seared through his clothes, burning lines of pain across his skin. The crowd gasped, then cheered. They loved an early hit. Aldrich smirked. Too slow, Mask Boy. That's what you get for. He stopped. Kael was still standing. Not just standing. He was straightening, the faint smell of ozone rising from his body as the lightning dissipated into his humiliation's mantle. The skill absorbed the energy, converting the pain into a cool, tingling reserve. Kael had taken worse in the Whispering Woods, when he practiced by letting mockery blasts rebound off trees into his own flesh. My turn, Kael said, his altered voice flat. He didn't use a wand or incantation. He simply raised a hand and unleashed Scorn's echo. The skill was born from a memory. The day Professor Thorne had declared Kael's mana core barely fit to light a candle before the entire first-year class. Now, that memory became power. A wave of invisible force shot from Kael's palm, not aimed at Aldrich's body, but at his mind. It carried the psychic residue of 100 whispered insults, the weight of being judged worthless. Aldrich staggered as it hit him, his confident pose crumbling. His eyes widened with sudden, inexplicable shame, the kind that made your throat close and your hands tremble. What is this? He stammered, his wand hand dropping. Kael advanced, each step measured. You called me a coward, he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. But you're the one who hides behind bribes and lies. Shut up. Aldrich snarled, rallying. He cast a quick shield spell, a translucent dome of energy snapping into place around him. You don't know anything. He began chanting a more complex spell, fire gathering at his wand tip. Kael didn't interrupt him. He let Aldrich build the spell, let the crowd lean forward in anticipation. Fireball was a crowd pleaser, flashy, dangerous, perfect for humiliating an opponent with burns. As the sphere of flame grew to the size of a melon, Kael reached into Karma's ledger. The book's pages glowed in his mind's eye, the entry about Aldrich's cheating bright as a beacon. Your transmutation exam, Kael said, his voice cutting through Aldrich's chanting. Spring semester last year. You paid Proctor Gellert 50 gold marks to look the other way while you used a pre-enchanted alembic. You scored 98%, the highest in the class. Aldrich's chanting faltered. The fireball wavered. Lies, he shouted, but his voice cracked. You're making that up. Am I? Kael asked. He raised a hand, and from his fingertips, illusion magic, a skill he'd unlocked after a particularly brutal training session where he'd imagined his bullies' faces on target dummies, wove an image in the air above the stage. It showed Aldrich, clear as day, slipping a pouch of coins to a nervous-looking proctor in a back corridor of the Academy's alchemy wing. The image was grainy, reconstructed from Karma's ledger's records, but unmistakable. The crowd's murmur turned into a roar. Cheers became boos. Nobles in the audience exchanged shocked glances. Students who'd resented Aldrich's high score began shouting accusations. The humiliation was no longer Kael's. It was flowing back to its source, and the spectators were multiplying its power. Martyr's reversal activated, Kael's mind sang. Asterisk public humiliation of tormentor detected. Spectators, 517. Intensity, high. Experience bonus, 150%. Unlocking. Asterisk he felt a surge, like a dam breaking inside him. His mana core, once feeble, blazed with new strength. Levels ticked upward. He'd been hovering at the low end of Tier 3. Now he solidly entered Tier 4. A new skill flickered at the edge of his consciousness, Truth's Burden, allowing him to amplify revealed secrets with psychological pressure. Aldrich was breaking. The fireball sputtered out. His shield spell flickered as his concentration shattered under the weight of 500 pairs of accusing eyes. It wasn't, I didn't, he babbled, backing toward the edge of the stage. Kael didn't give him time to recover. He cast Mockery Blast, a skill that shaped humiliation into physical force. A wave of dark purple energy, studded with ghostly, laughing faces, shot from his hands. It struck Aldrich's shield, and this time, the shield didn't hold. It shattered with a sound like breaking glass, and the blast sent Aldrich sprawling to the stones, his wand clattering away. The referee stepped forward. Aldrich Vance, do you yield? Aldrich tried to push himself up, but his arms trembled too badly. He looked at the crowd, at the still hovering illusion of his bribe, at Kael's impassive mask. His face crumpled. I yield. He whispered, then louder, I yield. The referee raised Kael's hand. Victory to the Martyr. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered for the underdog's win, others booed at the exposed corruption, many simply buzzed with scandalized excitement. But to Kael, it was all energy. He felt every jeer, every gasp, every shocked whisper flowing into him, cooling the old burns of his past. As he lowered his arm, he glanced at Karma's ledger. Aldrich's entry now had an addendum, asterisk publicly exposed for cheating. Humiliation returned, complete. Karma balanced, asterisk. He turned to leave the stage, but a voice from the stands stopped him. A professor, tall and severe, with the insignia of the disciplinary committee on his robe. You there, Martyr? That accusation. Do you have proof beyond this illusion? Kael looked at him. Check Proctor Gellert's financial records. And the alembic in Aldrich's dormitory. It's still enchanted with another student's signature. He'd learned that during his training, when Karma's ledger had granted him fleeting visions of connected evidence. The truth doesn't need my proof to exist. He walked off the stage, the crowd's noise fading behind him as he entered the tunnel. Alone in the dimness, he pulled off his mask for a moment, taking a deep breath. His face in a polished metal wall panel looked older, harder, but his eyes gleamed with something new. Not just vengeance, but purpose. Aldrich was the first. There were so many more entries in the ledger. As he replaced the mask, a system notification solidified in his mind. Asterisk Martyr's reversal summary. First public victory against Tormentor. Experience gained. 5 levels, now level 42, Tier 4. New skill unlocked. Truth's Burden, Tier 2. Karma's ledger updated. 1 debt settled. Public perception shifted. The Martyr is now a figure of intrigue and fear. Asterisk. Kael smiled behind the mask. The tournament had just begun, and already, the humiliation was starting to flow the other way. He thought of the other names in his ledger, the bigger bullies, the professors who'd condescended, the headmaster who'd orchestrated his downfall. They would all get their turn on stage. He stepped back into the light of the pavilion, where other competitors eyed him warily. Word traveled fast. The mysterious Martyr wasn't just a fighter. He was a revealer of secrets. And in the Arcane Academy, where reputation was everything, that made him more dangerous than any fireball. Next match in 2 hours, an attendant told him, handing a new token. Arena 2. Your opponent is listed as. The attendant paused, frowning at the bracket. It's one of the senior students. A favorite in the tournament. Kael took the token. It was warm with enchantment. What's his name? Dorian Thorn, the attendant said. Son of Professor Thorn. He's never lost a duel. Kael's fingers tightened around the token. Professor Thorn, the man who'd first declared him a cripple before the entire class. The memory rose, sharp and bitter, and with it, Karma's ledger flipped to a fresh page, eager for another entry. Dorian hadn't been a direct bully, but he'd basked in his father's approval while Kael suffered. Another link in the chain. Good, Kael said, his voice low. I've been waiting for a challenge. He walked away, the whispers following him like shadows. The Martyr had drawn first blood, and the Academy was starting to realize this wasn't just a tournament. It was a reckoning. The Arcane Academy's grand tournament arena hummed with an electric tension that morning, the air thick with the scent of ozone from residual mana and the murmur of 1,000 voices. Kael stood in the contestants' preparation chamber, his fingers tracing the edges of the plain, silvered mask that concealed his face. The identity of the Martyr, now a growing enigma among the student body. Through the narrow slit of the mask, he watched the polished marble floor reflect the shimmering magical lights above, his mind replaying the previous day's victory over Aldrich Vance. The surge of power from that public humiliation still tingled in his veins, a sweet, dark nectar that fueled his resolve. Outside, the announcer's voice boomed through enchanted amplifiers, echoing across the stands. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second round of the tournament. Our first match features the mysterious newcomer, the Martyr, against the formidable Alara Thornwood. Kael's lips curled into a grim smile beneath the mask. Alara Thornwood, a noble scion who had once tripped him in the academy halls, spilling his books while her friends laughed. In his mind, Karma's ledger flickered, displaying the entry. Alara Thornwood. Public mockery. Third-year alchemy corridor. 14 insults recorded. Weakness. Secretly plagiarized her thesis on elemental fusion. The knowledge was a cold comfort, a weapon forged from his own pain. He stepped into the arena, the roar of the crowd washing over him like a physical wave. The stadium was a colossal bowl of white stone, tiered seats packed with students, professors, and visiting dignitaries. Magical screens floated overhead, projecting close-ups of the combatants. Kael's simple gray robes contrasted sharply with Alara's ornate, emerald green mage attire, embroidered with her family crest. She stood across from him, a haughty smirk on her face, her wand tipped with a glittering gemstone. "So, you're the one who embarrassed poor Aldrich," Alara called out, her voice dripping with condescension. "A masked fool playing at heroics. Let's see how long you last against real talent." The crowd cheered her on, a chorus of support for the noble favorite. Kael felt the familiar sting of public disdain, the jeers, the mocking laughter, and deep within, his Martyr's reversal ability stirred. A notification only he could see shimmered in his vision. Public humiliation detected. 500+ spectators. Experience gain increased by 30%. Stat boost. +5 to agility. +3 to mana control. He welcomed it, letting the shame fuel him like kindling to a fire. The match began with a flash of light as Alara unleashed a volley of emerald energy bolts, each crackling with destructive force. Kael dodged with practiced ease, his movements fluid from months of secret training in the forest. He didn't retaliate immediately. Instead, he let her press the attack, taking a glancing hit to his shoulder that sent a jolt of pain through him. The crowd gasped, then erupted in laughter as he staggered. "Is that all you have, Martyr?" Alara taunted, twirling her wand. "I expected more from someone who talks so big." Kael ignored the taunts, focusing on the energy building within him. With each insult, each mocking cheer, his power grew. He could feel it, a reservoir of strength drawn from their cruelty. After a minute of evading, he decided it was time. Raising a hand, he channeled mana into a new skill he'd unlocked after the Aldrich match, Truth's Burden. The air around Alara thickened, and for a moment, she faltered, her confidence wavering as if weighed down by invisible chains. "What is this?" she muttered, her smirk fading. Kael didn't answer. Instead, he activated Karma's ledger, focusing on the entry about her thesis. With a subtle gesture, he cast an illusion, a shimmering image that appeared above the arena, visible to all on the magical screens. It showed Alara in the Academy library late at night, copying passages from a forbidden text into her parchment, her face illuminated by a solitary lamp. The crowd's laughter died abruptly, replaced by a hushed silence. Alara's eyes widened in horror. "No, that's a lie," she screamed, but the evidence was undeniable. The text's title, Advanced Elemental Fusion, Restricted Access, glowed in the illusion. "Plagiarism is a serious offense, Alara Thornwood," Kael said, his voice modulated by the mask to sound deeper, more resonant. Your talent is built on stolen words. The arena erupted into chaos. Some booed Alara, others shouted in disbelief. The professors in the stands exchanged grim looks. Kael felt another surge. Public reversal achieved, exposing hidden shame. Experience gain, plus 1000 XP. New skill unlocked. Illusion of truth, enhances deception detection. That he leveled up, his mana core glowing brighter beneath his robes. Alara, trembling with rage and shame, launched a desperate attack, but her focus was shattered. Kael deflected it easily with a shame shield, a translucent barrier that absorbed her energy and reflected it back as a weak pulse of light. She collapsed to her knees, yielding before the judge could intervene. As she was escorted out, weeping, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, speculating about the martyr's identity and motives. Kael left the arena without a word, retreating to the preparation chamber. His heart pounded not from exertion, but from the addictive rush of turning humiliation into power. He checked his stats in his mind's eye. Level 28, with skills like pain absorption, scorn's echo, and now illusion of truth. Each was a trophy from his suffering. The next match came quickly. His opponent was Gareth Ironwood, a burly combat mage who had once shoved him into a fountain during a campus festival. Gareth entered the arena with a swagger, his muscular frame clad in enchanted plate armor. Heard you like exposing secrets, Martyr, he growled. Well, I've got none. I win with pure strength. The fight was brutal and physical. Gareth relied on close-quarters mana-enhanced strikes, each blow shaking the ground. Kael took a few hits deliberately, feeling the pain radiate through his body, each one a catalyst for his martyr's reversal. The crowd, initially supportive of Gareth, began to jeer as Kael seemed to falter, his mask cracking slightly under a powerful punch. Look at him. The martyr's nothing but a weakling, someone shouted, and others joined in, their taunts fueling Kael's growth. Public humiliation detected, 800 plus spectators. Experience gain increased by 40%. Stat boost, plus 7 to strength, plus 4 to endurance, As Gareth prepared for a finishing move, Kael tapped into Karma's ledger. The entry for Gareth flashed, Gareth Ironwood, physical bullying, festival incident. Weakness, faked an injury to avoid a dangerous mission, letting a teammate take the fall. With a focused thought, Kael projected another illusion, this time showing Gareth in a healer's tent, pretending a sprained ankle while his team ventured into a monster-infested forest. The image was clear, with Gareth's smirk as he lounged, safe and sound. The crowd's jeers turned to gasps of outrage. Coward, someone yelled, and others took up the chant. Gareth's face paled, his confidence crumbling. It's not true. He's manipulating you, he protested, but the damage was done. Kael seized the moment, using Scorn's echo to amplify the crowd's disdain into a psychic wave that disoriented Gareth. Then, with a swift motion, he channeled his accumulated power into a mockery blast, a burst of energy that struck Gareth's armor, not with force, but with the weight of public shame. Gareth stumbled back, his will broken, and yielded without another word. Another victory, another level gained. Kael felt stronger than ever, but also weary. The emotional toll of reliving each humiliation was a heavy burden. As he exited the arena, he overheard snippets of conversation from the stands. Who is he? Maybe a former student seeking revenge. The headmaster must know something. The speculation buzzed like insects, a background hum to his thoughts. The day wore on, and Kael faced two more opponents, minor tormentors from his past, each with their own hidden shames exposed through Karma's ledger. One was caught in a lie about stealing academy funds, another revealed as a cheat in romantic entanglements. With each match, the academy's buzz grew louder, and Kael's identity remained a tantalizing mystery. Professors began to watch him more closely, their expressions a mix of curiosity and suspicion. By late afternoon, Kael stood in the preparation chamber once more, his body aching but his spirit alight with power. He had advanced to the quarterfinals, his record unblemished. The chamber was quiet, the only sound the distant roar of the crowd from another match. He removed his mask briefly, wiping sweat from his brow, his reflection in a polished shield showing the determined eyes of the boy once called a cripple. A tournament official entered, holding a scroll. "The Martyr, your next opponent has been drawn," he said, his voice neutral. "You will face Alistair Vance in the quarterfinals." Kael's breath caught. Alistair Vance, Aldrich's older brother, a prodigy known for his ruthless efficiency and the favor of the Headmaster. More importantly, Alistair was the Headmaster's prized student, rumored to be groomed for greatness. This was no minor bully. This was a direct link to the man who had orchestrated Kael's downfall. He nodded, slipping the mask back on. "I accept." As the official left, Kael's mind raced. Alistair was powerful, likely stronger than anyone he'd faced so far. But with Karma's ledger, he knew Alistair's secrets too. Whispers of using banned mana enhancers, of cruel experiments on lesser students. The match would be a turning point, a chance to strike at the heart of the Academy's corruption. He stepped out into the corridor, heading toward the arena for the announcement. The hallway was lined with posters of past champions, their faces smiling down mockingly. Kael ignored them, his focus sharpening. As he approached the arena entrance, the announcer's voice boomed again, drawing cheers from the crowd. And now, for the quarterfinal matchups. In one corner, the enigmatic Martyr, and in the other, the Academy's own prodigy, the Headmaster's favored son, Alistair Vance. The crowd erupted into deafening applause, a mix of adoration for Alistair and curiosity for the Martyr. Kael paused at the threshold, watching as Alistair strode into the arena, clad in pristine white robes, his expression arrogant and assured. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, Kael felt a chill, not of fear, but of anticipation. This was it, the next step in his march toward vengeance. He took a deep breath, the sounds of the crowd fading into a dull roar in his ears. With each insult, each moment of shame, he had grown stronger. Now, facing the Headmaster's prodigy son, he would show them all what power born from humiliation could truly do. The chapter closed with Kael stepping into the light, his mask glinting, ready for the battle ahead. The grand arena of the Arcane Academy shimmered under the midday sun, its enchanted stone seats packed with thousands of spectators. At the center of the vast circular stage, Kael stood motionless in his simple gray combat robes, the silver mask he'd crafted himself obscuring his face completely. Across from him, Alistair Vance adjusted the gold-trimmed sleeves of his Academy uniform with practiced arrogance, a smirk playing on his lips as the crowd chanted his name. "Alistair! Alistair! Alistair!" The roar was deafening, a tidal wave of adoration for the Headmaster's prodigy son. Kael's fingers tightened around the plain wooden staff he carried. No enchanted weapon, just a simple tool to channel mana. He could feel the familiar sting of humiliation already beginning to prickle at his skin, not from any direct insult yet, but from the sheer weight of public expectation. Every eye in the arena was fixed on him, the mysterious Martyr, and he knew most were waiting for his inevitable defeat. Contenders approach. The head judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, stood at the edge of the stage. Kael and Alistair moved forward until they were 10 paces apart. Up close, Kael could see the subtle glow of mana-infused jewelry on Alistair's person, a ring on his left hand, a pendant beneath his collar. The prodigy's blue eyes scanned Kael's masked face with open disdain. "So you're the one who's been making a spectacle of himself," Alistair said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd's murmurs. A masked nobody exposing the flaws of lesser students. How quaint. Kael remained silent, but internally, his mind was racing. The Martyr's reversal ability hummed in his core, a constant presence now. He could feel it drinking in the atmosphere of contempt, the unspoken assumption that he was outmatched. With every jeer from Alistair's supporters in the stands, a tiny trickle of experience points added to his reserves. He focused on keeping his breathing steady. Let the duel commence. The judge's voice echoed through magical amplifiers. Alistair didn't wait. He raised a hand, and a torrent of blue-white lightning erupted from his fingertips, arcing toward Kael with terrifying speed. Kael brought his staff up, channeling mana into a basic barrier spell. The lightning struck with a deafening crack, shattering the barrier instantly and sending Kael stumbling backward. Pain lanced up his arms, but beneath it, he felt a surge of power, the Martyr's reversal responding to the public display of his weakness. Asterisk experience gained, 150 XP. Skill, pain absorption activated, converting 20% of damage to temporary stamina. Asterisk. The notification flashed in his mind, a familiar comfort. Alistair laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. Is that all? I expected more from the Academy's latest curiosity. From the stands, a group of noble students began chanting. Cripple in a mask. Show your face and run. Kael gritted his teeth behind the mask. The insults were generic, aimed at his anonymous persona, but they still fueled him. He could feel his mana core vibrating, growing stronger with each shouted taunt. He straightened, ignoring the ache in his muscles, and leveled his staff at Alistair. Your turn, Kael said, his voice modulated slightly by the mask's enchantment to sound deeper, more resonant. He cast a series of quick, low-level firebolts, not aiming to hit, but to test Alistair's defenses. The prodigy waved them aside with a casual gesture, a shimmering shield of water appearing around him. The bolts sizzled into steam. Alistair's smirk widened. Pathetic. Is this the best the so-called martyr can do? The crowd roared with laughter. Kael felt a hot flush of shame, not for himself, but for the persona he'd built. Yet even that shame was fuel. His experience bar ticked upward again, and a new skill notification appeared. Asterisk skill unlocked. Injustice retribution, passive. When facing an opponent who has publicly humiliated you, store 10% of damage received. Can be released as a counterattack once per duel. Asterisk. Kael's eyes narrowed behind the mask. This was it, the skill mentioned in his abilities hints, born from all the times he'd been mocked in this very arena. He stored the knowledge away, focusing on the duel. Alistair was already moving again, this time with a more complex spell. He traced runes in the air, and the ground beneath Kael's feet turned to grasping vines, thick and thorny. Kael leaped back, but not fast enough. The vines wrapped around his ankles, pulling him off balance. He hit the stage hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Alistair strolled closer, looking down at him with open contempt. You see, everyone? This is what happens when you let rumors inflate a nobody's reputation. The crowd's jeers intensified. Kael could see individual faces in the front rows, former classmates, professors who'd once failed him, even Headmaster Vance watching from his private box with an unreadable expression. The humiliation was palpable, a physical weight pressing down on him. But with it came power. His stats glowed internally, strength and agility increasing in real time. Asterisk level up. Reached level 28. New stat points allocated. Martyr's reversal bonus. +5 to all attributes due to public spectator count exceeding 3,000. Asterisk. Kael took a deep breath, the vines around his ankles loosening as he channeled raw mana into a burst of force. They shattered, and he rolled to his feet, his movements now fluid, enhanced. Alistair's eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. A minor trick. Let's end this. He began chanting, his voice rising into a crescendo. The air around him crackled with energy, and a massive sphere of condensed lightning formed above his head. The crowd fell silent, awed by the display of power. Kael recognized the spell, Storm's Judgment, a high-tier attack that required immense mana control. It was the kind of spell only a true prodigy could wield. But as Kael watched, he noticed something. Alistair's hands were trembling slightly, and there was a faint, unnatural purple glow around the lightning sphere. It was subtle, hidden within the brilliant blue-white energy, but Kael's enhanced perception caught it. His mind flashed to Karma's ledger, the skill that recorded every injustice against him. He focused inward, and the ledger unfolded in his mental vision. There, among the entries for Alistair's past mockery, was a new line, highlighted in red. Asterisk suspect's use of banned mana enhancers, Crimson Flux. Evidence, unnatural mana resonance in high-tier spells. Asterisk. The ledger had been updating throughout the duel, analyzing Alistair's every move. Kael's heart pounded. This was the secret shame he could expose. But first, he had to survive the attack. Alistair released the sphere. It shot toward Kael, expanding as it traveled, a miniature storm of destruction. Kael didn't try to dodge. Instead, he planted his staff on the ground and channeled every ounce of his accumulated power into injustice retribution. The stored damage from Alistair's earlier attacks, the lightning, the vines, the public mockery, surged forth, forming a shimmering, silver shield around him. The sphere struck. The impact was colossal, a deafening explosion of light and sound that shook the entire arena. Kael was thrown backward, skidding across the stage, but the shield held, absorbing the brunt of the force. When the light faded, he was on one knee, breathing heavily, his robes singed. But he was alive. The crowd gasped. No one had ever survived Storm's judgment from Alistair Vance. The prodigy stared, his smirk gone, replaced by confusion and dawning fear. Impossible. Kael pushed himself to his feet. His body ached, but the martyr's reversal was flooding him with energy now, the public shock and reversal of expectations fueling an exponential boost. He could feel new strength coursing through his veins. He pointed his staff at Alistair. "Your power is a lie," Kael said, his voice ringing out clear and strong, amplified by the arena's magic. "You use Crimson Flux, a banned mana enhancer, to fake your prowess." The silence that followed was absolute. Then murmurs broke out, growing into a roar of disbelief. Alistair's face paled. "You dare accuse me? You're a masked coward." But Kael wasn't done. He activated Karma's Ledger in its public mode, a feature he'd unlocked after his expulsion. A glowing, ethereal book appeared in the air above the stage, its pages flipping rapidly. It stopped on an entry, and words began to scroll across it, visible to everyone in the arena. Asterisk, Alistair Vance. Purchased Crimson Flux from black market dealer Silas Grimm, 3 vials, on the 15th of last moon. Used during advanced mana tests and tournament duels to amplify spell potency beyond natural limits. Witness, Academy janitor Milo, who discovered empty vials and trash. Asterisk. The crowd erupted. Shouts of cheater and disgrace filled the air. Alistair stumbled back, his confidence shattered. "No, it's not true. Father." He looked desperately toward Headmaster Vance's box. The Headmaster's face was stone, but his eyes held a flicker of something. Anger, or perhaps calculation. He did not move to defend his son. Kael advanced, his step steady. "You mocked others for their weaknesses while hiding your own. Now face the consequences." He didn't cast another spell. Instead, he simply stood before Alistair, letting the weight of public shame do its work. The prodigy's knees buckled. He collapsed to the stage, hands over his face, sobs racking his body. The crowd's jeers turned into a unified chant of shame. "Shame! Shame!" The head judge stepped forward, her expression grim. "By the laws of the tournament, use of banned substances results in immediate disqualification and suspension. Alistair Vance, you are stripped of your rank and barred from further competition." She gestured, and 2 Academy guards moved to escort the weeping Alistair away. As they passed, Kael caught a glimpse of the Headmaster watching, his gaze now fixed intently on Kael's masked form. There was no anger, only a cold, assessing look that sent a chill down Kael's spine. But for now, there was victory. Kael turned to face the crowd, which had fallen into a stunned silence. Then, slowly, a few cheers began, not for Alistair, but for the Martyr, the underdog who had exposed corruption. The mixed reaction, some admiration, some lingering mockery for his ragged appearance, triggered another surge in his abilities. Asterisk level up. Reached level 30. New skill unlocked. Public resonance. Temporarily amplify stats based on crowd emotional intensity. Asterisk. Kael allowed himself a small, hidden smile behind the mask. He had won, and in doing so, he'd taken another step toward his ultimate goal. But as he left the stage, the Headmaster's stare followed him, a silent reminder that the true battle was only beginning. The morning after his victory over Alistair Vance, Kael awoke in the cramped attic room he'd rented under a false name on the outskirts of the city. Sunlight filtered through a grimy window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He lay still for a moment, the echoes of yesterday's crowd still ringing in his ears, the gasps when he'd exposed Alistair's use of Crimson Flux, the stunned silence that followed the prodigy's collapse, and then the rising murmur of speculation about the Martyr. His body ached from the duel, but beneath the fatigue, a familiar warmth pulsed, the afterglow of leveling up. His Martyr's reversal had granted him another surge, pushing him to level 42, and unlocked a new skill, evasive insight, which sharpened his perception of threats. He flexed his fingers, feeling mana course through him, stronger, steadier than ever before. Yet, the memory of Headmaster Vance's cold, calculating gaze from the stands sent a chill down his spine. It hadn't been the look of a man shamed by his son's disgrace. It had been one of assessment, like a sculptor examining a half-finished statue. Kael rose, donning his simple tunic and trousers, then carefully lifted the mask from where it rested on a wooden crate. A featureless white porcelain face with only slits for eyes, crafted during his months of exile. He traced its smooth surface, a symbol of his new identity. The Martyr. The name had spread like wildfire through the Academy gossip channels, with theories ranging from a disgraced noble seeking revenge to a rogue mage from a rival institution. But Kael knew time was running out. His victories were drawing too much attention, and Vance was no fool. He'd need to be cautious today. After a sparse breakfast of dried fruit and water, Kael ventured into the city's lower districts, where the crowded streets offered anonymity. He moved with a practiced ease, blending into the flow of merchants and laborers. His destination was a hidden bookstore run by an old informant named Alara, who traded in secrets as much as tomes. As he walked, he kept his senses alert, evasive insight tingling at the edges of his awareness. The skill was subtle, a whisper in his mind that highlighted potential dangers. Today, it hummed persistently, like a low-grade alarm. He turned down a narrow alley, the scent of damp stone and rotting vegetables filling the air. Halfway through, evasive insight flared. Kael froze, pressing himself against a shadowed wall. Two figures emerged from a side passage, tall, broad-shouldered men in nondescript gray cloaks, but their movements were too precise, too coordinated for common thugs. Academy enforcers. He recognized the subtle glint of mana detection amulets beneath their cloaks. They were scanning the area, their eyes sweeping over the alley with methodical intensity. Kael held his breath, his heart pounding. Had they tracked him here? No, they seemed to be searching broadly, not targeting him specifically. Vance must have sent agents to investigate the Martyr, casting a wide net across the city. One of the enforcers paused, his amulet glowing faintly. Residual mana signature nearby, strong, recent. Could be our target. Kael's mind raced. He'd used minimal magic since leaving the arena, but the duel had left traces. He needed to divert them. With a silent prayer, he channeled a trickle of mana into Mockery Blast, a skill he'd unlocked weeks ago, not to attack, but to create a distraction. He aimed at a pile of crates further down the alley, sending a weak, invisible pulse that mimicked the sound of scuttling rats. The enforcer's heads snapped toward the noise, their attention shifting. In that moment, Kael slipped into a recessed doorway, his shame shield skill, a defensive barrier fueled by past humiliations, dampening his mana signature to near invisibility. The enforcers moved past, their boots echoing on the cobblestones, and disappeared around a corner. Kael exhaled slowly, sweat beading on his forehead. That was too close. Vance's net was tightening. He waited a few minutes before continuing, taking a circuitous route to Alara's bookstore. The shop was tucked beneath a sagging tenement, its sign faded to illegibility. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old parchment and incense. Alara, a wizened woman with sharp eyes behind spectacles, looked up from a ledger as he entered. "Ah, the masked one. I heard about your little spectacle yesterday. Caused quite a stir." Kael nodded, his voice muffled by the mask. "I need information, Alara, about Headmaster Vance's recent movements. Any unusual orders, secret investigations." Alara chuckled dryly, setting down her quill. "Always straight to business. That'll cost you, dear. But since you're stirring the pot so nicely," she rummaged under the counter, producing a small, sealed scroll. "A contact in the Academy's administrative wing slipped this to me. It's a log of Vance's private communications from the past month. Paid a pretty penny for it." Kael handed over a pouch of coins, earnings from minor arena bets, and took the scroll. He broke the seal, his eyes scanning the cramped script. Most entries were mundane, budget approvals, staff meetings. But one, dated just after his expulsion trial, caught his attention. It was a memo from Vance to a subordinate. Subject: Kael. Continue monitoring via scrying orbs. Record all public interactions. Report any anomalous mana spikes. The Martyr's reversal hypothesis proceeds as planned. Kael's blood ran cold. The words blurred before his eyes. Martyr's reversal, his own secret ability, named in Vance's handwriting. How? He'd never spoken of it to anyone. His hands trembled as he read on. Another entry, from earlier, around the time of his first public duel. Initiate Phase 1. Amplify humiliation protocols for subject Kael. Ensure maximum spectator exposure. Note, potential correlation between shame events and mana fluctuations. A memory surged forward, unbidden, a flashback from his earliest days at the Academy. Kael had been summoned to Vance's office after failing a mana test. The Headmaster had been stern, but not cruel. Kael, Vance had said, his voice echoing in the ornate room. Your weakness is a burden, but perhaps it can serve a purpose. Endure what comes. The Academy watches. At the time, Kael had thought it empty encouragement. Now, with the scroll in hand, the words took on a sinister meaning. Vance hadn't been offering solace. He'd been issuing a directive. The flashback expanded in his mind's eye. He saw Vance in his office, late at night, reviewing magical recordings of Kael's humiliations, the duel with the bully, the demonstration failures. The Headmaster had been taking notes, a faint smile on his lips. Fascinating, Vance had murmured to an assistant. The Martyr's reversal manifests as predicted. Each public shame triggers exponential growth. We must escalate the stimuli. Then, the scene shifted to the expulsion trial. Vance on the stage, his voice booming through the magical amplifiers, denouncing Kael as a stain. But behind the anger, his eyes had been calculating, watching Kael's reaction like a scientist observing an experiment. The massive level spike that followed. Vance had expected it, had orchestrated it. Kael staggered, leaning against a bookshelf. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't been a victim of random cruelty. He'd been a pawn in Vance's grand design. Every insult, every public defeat, had been carefully staged to fuel his ability. The Headmaster had known all along, had been monitoring him, manipulating him to become a weapon. The morale comment he'd overheard after his first duel. It wasn't about keeping a cripple for laughs. It was about maintaining a test subject. Kael's chest tightened with a mix of rage and betrayal. All those years of suffering, the silent vows to endure, the secret triumphs of leveling up, they were all part of Vance's scheme. He'd been a lab rat, and the Academy his cage. Alara watched him, her expression unreadable. Bad news, I take it. Kael folded the scroll, his voice low and strained. Worse than I imagined. Vance has been playing me from the start. He explained briefly, omitting the details of his ability but emphasizing the manipulation. Alara's eyes widened. So that's why he's been so obsessed with the Martyr. He suspects you're his creation gone rogue. You should leave the city, Kael. Disappear again. Kael shook his head, the mask hiding his grim determination. No, I've run enough. If Vance wants a weapon, I'll show him what happens when a pawn realizes it's on the board. His karma's ledger stirred in his mind, the log of injustices glowing with new entries, each one now marked with Vance's orchestration. The skill had evolved. It now highlighted patterns, showing how Vance's actions had woven a web of shame around him. Kael could use this. He had to confront Vance, but not yet. First, he needed to understand the full extent of the plot. He spent the next few hours in the bookstore's back room, cross-referencing the scroll with his own memories and karma's ledger. The pieces fell into place. Vance had agents planted among the student body to provoke Kael, had arranged the televised events to maximize spectators, and had even leaked information to rival academies to gauge their reactions. It was all a test, to see how much power could be wrung from humiliation. The end goal, as hinted in later entries, was to use Kael as a deterrent against rival institutions, a secret weapon to be unveiled in the grand tournament. But Kael's expulsion and disappearance had thrown a wrench in the plan, and now, the Martyr's rise was an unexpected variable. As dusk fell, Kael prepared to leave. Alara handed him a cloaking charm, a minor artifact to mask his mana further. Be careful, boy. Vance isn't one to let a tool slip away. Kael nodded his thanks and stepped back into the alley. The city was bathed in twilight, lanterns flickering to life. His evasive insight hummed again, but softer now. The immediate threat had passed. As he walked, his mind churned. The humiliation he'd endured, the power he'd gained, it was all tainted by Vance's manipulation. Yet, a strange clarity settled over him. He was no longer just a victim seeking revenge. He was a player in a larger game, one he now understood. Vance had wanted a weapon, but Kael would become something else, a reckoning. He returned to his attic, the mask cool against his skin. Sitting on the floor, he opened Karma's ledger, scrolling through the entries. Each one, from the first year in class to Alistair's downfall, was now annotated with Vance's influence. The skill had grown, offering tactical insights, weaknesses in Vance's network, times when surveillance was lax. Kael smiled bitterly. Even in his manipulation, Vance had given him the tools to fight back. The Martyr's reversal pulsed within him, fueled by this new, profound betrayal. He could feel another level approaching, the experience from today's revelations accumulating. He lay down, staring at the cracked ceiling. Tomorrow, the tournament would resume with the semifinals. Vance would be watching, probing. Kael knew he had to stay ahead, to use every shred of power he'd gained from being a pawn. As sleep crept in, a resolve hardened in his heart. He would face Vance, but on his own terms. The Headmaster had created a monster from humiliation, and now that monster knew its maker. The Arcane Academy's administrative tower loomed like a monolith of polished obsidian against the twilight sky, its spires piercing low-hanging clouds tinged with violet from residual mana emissions. Kael stood at the base, his breath forming faint mist in the chill evening air. He wore simple traveler's garb, a dark hooded cloak over leather armor, but beneath it, his body thrummed with power accumulated from years of public shame. The Martyr's reversal ability hummed within his core, a constant reminder that every insult, every jeer, every condescending glance had been fuel for this moment. He adjusted the mask tucked into his belt, the same one he'd worn as the Martyr in the tournament, but tonight, he wouldn't need it. Tonight, he would face Headmaster Alistair Vance as himself. Kael's fingers brushed the leather-bound journal at his side, Karma's ledger, its pages heavy with recorded injustices. The scroll from Alara burned in his memory. Vance had orchestrated it all, from Kael's first failed mana test to the televised expulsion trial. The humiliation hadn't been random cruelty. It had been calculated cultivation. "You're a weapon he's been forging in the fires of shame," Alara's words echoed. Kael's jaw tightened. He'd spent nights in the hidden forest, training until his muscles screamed, channeling the memory of laughter into combat skills like Shame Shield and Mockery Blast. But now, the training was over. It was time for answers. The tower's entrance was guarded by two stone golems, their eyes glowing with enchanted blue light. As Kael approached, they shifted, blocking his path with massive arms. "State your business," one rumbled, its voice like grinding rocks. Kael didn't flinch. He reached into his cloak and produced a small, glowing token, a pass Alara had provided, forged from Vance's own signature magic. "I have an appointment with the Headmaster." The golems examined the token, their light flickering, then stepped aside, the heavy doors swinging inward with a whisper of ancient hinges. The interior was a study in opulent austerity. Marble floors reflected the light of floating mana orbs, and tapestries depicting academy victories lined the walls. Kael's boots echoed in the vast hallway, each step a drumbeat of resolve. He remembered walking these halls as a student, shoulders hunched under the weight of mockery. Now he stood straight, his weak mana core no longer a source of pain, but a wellspring of hidden strength. The Martyr's reversal had transformed every public humiliation into stat boosts. His agility, endurance, and magical resistance were now at levels that would make even the Academy's prodigies pale. At the end of the hall, a spiral staircase led upward. Kael climbed, his mind racing. What would Vance say? The Headmaster had always been an imposing figure, tall and stern, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through illusions. In class, he'd spoken of honor and discipline, all while secretly engineering Kael's suffering. Kael's hand tightened on Karma's ledger. The book pulsed warmly, its pages filled with entries. "Professor Alden called you mana-starved waste before 50 spectators. Plus 150 XP. Student Marcus tripped you in cafeteria, laughter from 200. Unlocked skill, pain absorption. Each one a scar, each one now a tool." He reached the top floor, where a single door of dark oak stood ajar. Light spilled from within, casting long shadows. Kael pushed it open. Headmaster Vance's office was a cavernous room lined with bookshelves reaching to the ceiling, their volumes bound in leather and glowing with protective spells. A large desk of polished ebony dominated the center, behind which Vance sat, writing with a quill that dripped shimmering ink. He didn't look up as Kael entered. "I wondered when you'd come, Kael," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "Or should I call you the Martyr? Your performance in the tournament has been entertaining." Kael stepped forward, letting the door click shut behind him. The room was silent except for the crackle of a fireplace in the corner. "You knew," Kael said, his voice low but steady. "You knew about my ability from the start." Vance finally set down his quill and looked up. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, devoid of the pity or contempt Kael had grown accustomed to. Instead, they held a calculating gleam. "Of course I knew. The Martyr's reversal is a rare curse, or blessing, depending on perspective. I detected its signature during your enrollment screening. A weak mana core, yes, but intertwined with a latent power that thrived on public degradation." He stood, walking around the desk, his robes whispering against the floor. "Sit, Kael. We have much to discuss." Kael remained standing. "I'll stand. After all, I've spent enough time on my knees in front of you." The words were bitter, but they carried no tremor. Inside, his heart hammered, but the Martyr's reversal hummed louder, feeding off the tension. This private confrontation might not have spectators, but the stakes were high, and the psychological shame of facing his manipulator was triggering subtle stat boosts. His perception sharpened, his mana sensitivity increased. Vance smiled, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. Still defiant. "Good. That defiance is what makes you valuable." He gestured to a chair, but when Kael didn't move, he shrugged. "Very well. Let me be direct. I orchestrated your humiliations, the failed tests, the public duels, the expulsion trial. All of it. I needed to see if you could harness the Martyr's reversal to its full potential. And you have. You've grown from a cripple into a force that could rival the champions of rival academies." Kael's breath caught. He'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was like a physical blow. The memories flooded back. The first mana test, where the entire class laughed as his core flickered weakly. The duel with Marcus, where he was beaten bloody while magical screens broadcast his defeat. The expulsion trial, with Vance's voice condemning him before thousands. Each event had been staged. "You used me," Kael whispered, his hands curling into fists. "You made me suffer for your own ends." "Yes," Vance said, his tone matter of fact. "And in doing so, I gave you power. Without my interventions, you'd still be a weakling, scraping by on pity. Instead, you've unlocked skills and stats beyond your wildest dreams. Look at you now, able to stand here and challenge me. That's my doing." He paused, his gaze intense. "I want to offer you a deal, Kael. Join me. Together, we can use your ability to crush the competing academies, Solaris, Verdant Grove, Ironhold. They look down on us, think us soft. With you as my weapon, we can humiliate them publicly, fuel your growth further, and establish the Arcane Academy as the supreme power in the realm." Kael stared, disbelief warring with anger. The Headmaster was proposing to turn Kael's curse into a tool for conquest. "You want me to become what you made me, a puppet for more shame, more manipulation?" Vance's expression hardened. "Don't be naive. Power is what matters in this world. You've tasted it, the surge of strength when a crowd mocks you, the unlocking of new abilities with each defeat. Imagine that on a grand scale. I'll orchestrate scenarios where you face off against rival champions in televised events. You'll lose publicly, gain immense power, then turn the tables in rematches. We'll record every insult in your karma's ledger and use it to expose their weaknesses. It's a perfect symbiosis." Kael's mind raced. The offer was tempting in a dark way. He could embrace the power he'd gained, use it to never feel weak again. But then he thought of the years of pain, the loneliness, the moments he'd cried in secret after yet another humiliation. Vance had stolen his dignity, treating him as an experiment. "No," Kael said, the word firm. "I won't be your weapon. My power is mine, born from my endurance, not your schemes. I'll expose you instead. I have karma's ledger. It records every injustice. I'll show the Academy what you've done." Vance's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, and the air in the room grew colder. A noble sentiment, but foolish. You think you can threaten me? I am the headmaster of the most prestigious academy in the land. My influence reaches far beyond these walls. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. Refuse my deal, and I will destroy you. I'll reveal your identity as the Martyr to the public. Imagine it, Kael, the cripple who dared to pretend he's a champion. The crowd that's starting to admire you will turn on you in an instant. They'll laugh, they'll jeer, they'll call you a fraud. And your martyr's reversal will feed on that shame, yes, but it will also break you. You'll be alone, with no allies, no sanctuary. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Kael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Vance was right. If his identity was exposed, the public humiliation would be catastrophic. He'd gain power, but at the cost of everything he'd fought for. Yet, yielding felt worse. He met Vance's gaze, his own eyes blazing with a fire forged in countless moments of shame. I've endured worse, Kael said, his voice steady. You taught me how to survive humiliation. Now I'll use that lesson against you. I refuse your deal. For a long moment, Vance was silent, his expression unreadable. Then, he sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. So be it. You leave me no choice. He walked back to his desk, picking up a small, crystal orb. This is linked to the Academy's broadcast system. With a word, I can announce your identity to every magical screen in the city. The tournament semifinals are tomorrow. Imagine the spectacle. But I'll give you one last chance. Sleep on it. If you change your mind, come to me before dawn. Kael turned to leave, his heart pounding. At the door, he paused. You underestimated me, Headmaster. You thought shame would make me compliant, but it made me stronger than you ever imagined. He didn't look back as he exited, descending the staircase with quick, determined steps. Outside, the night had deepened, stars piercing the sky. Kael leaned against the tower's cold stone, breathing heavily. The confrontation had been intense, but it had also clarified things. Vance saw him as a tool, but Kael was more. He was a survivor, a force of retribution. He pulled out Karma's ledger, flipping to the latest entry, which glowed faintly. Headmaster Vance, threatened public exposure, private confrontation. Plus 500 XP, unlocked skill, resolve of the oppressed. A small smile touched his lips. Even here, in private, the ability had rewarded his defiance. He had a choice now, run and hide, or face the coming storm head-on. The tournament semifinals loomed. If Vance exposed him there, the humiliation would be immense, but so would the power gain. Kael's mind raced with strategies. He could use Karma's ledger to preempt Vance, perhaps revealing the Headmaster's schemes first. Or he could embrace the exposure, turning the public's mockery into an even greater weapon. As he walked away from the tower, the weight of the decision settled on him. But for the first time, it felt like a weight he could bear. He had been forged in shame, and now he would wield that shame as a blade. The path ahead was dark, but Kael's steps were sure. He had answers, and with them, a newfound purpose, to break Vance's gambit, no matter the cost. The grand arena of the Arcane Academy shimmered under the midday sun, its enchanted stone seats packed with thousands of spectators. Magic screens floated overhead, broadcasting every detail to the city beyond. Kael stood in the contestants' entrance tunnel, his fingers tracing the edges of the silver mask that concealed his face. The cool metal felt like a second skin now, a barrier between the boy who had been broken and the warrior who had risen from that shame. He could hear the roar of the crowd, a distant thunder that vibrated through the floor. Next match, the Martyr versus Arcturus Thorn. The announcer's voice boomed, amplified by magic to echo across the arena. Kael took a deep breath, the scent of ozone and sweat filling his nostrils. This was the semifinal. One step away from the championship bout. One step closer to facing Headmaster Vance's champion. He adjusted the simple gray robes he wore, a stark contrast to the elaborate magical armor most competitors favored. His appearance was part of the mystique, the unknown fighter who defeated opponents with seemingly effortless skill. As he stepped into the sunlight, the crowd's noise swelled. Some cheered for the Martyr, intrigued by his mysterious rise. Others booed, resenting an outsider's success. Kael felt the familiar prickling sensation on his skin, the weight of their gazes, their judgments. It was fuel. Every whisper, every skeptical glance fed the ember of power burning in his chest. His Martyr's reversal ability hummed quietly, a constant companion turning scorn into strength. Across the arena, Arcturus Thorn awaited. A tall mage in his late 20s, he wore robes of deep crimson embroidered with gold sigils. His face was sharp, aristocratic, with cold blue eyes that held a knowing glint. Arcturus was a professor of advanced mana theory, a rising star in the Academy's hierarchy. And, as Kael knew from whispered rumors in the halls years ago, one of Headmaster Vance's most trusted allies. The mysterious Martyr, Arcturus said, his voice carrying easily without amplification. He didn't bow, a breach of tournament etiquette that drew murmurs from the crowd. How quaint. A masked warrior in a mage's tournament. Tell me, do you hide your face because it's too ugly, or because you're ashamed of who you are? Laughter rippled through the stands. Kael felt a surge of energy, small, but noticeable. The insult was public, witnessed by thousands. His stats ticked upward imperceptibly. He remained silent, his posture relaxed. Let them mock. Each jeer was another brick in the foundation of his victory. The referee, a stern-faced elder mage, stepped between them. Combatants, you know the rules. No lethal spells. Yield or be incapacitated. Begin. He struck a gong, and the match started. Arcturus didn't hesitate. He raised his hands, and the air crackled with energy. Let's see what you're made of, Maskwearer. Arcane Lance. A beam of pure mana shot toward Kael, fast and precise. Kael didn't dodge. He raised a hand, and a translucent shield shimmered into existence. Shame Shield, a skill he'd unlocked after a particularly brutal public beating in his second year. The lance struck the shield and dissipated harmlessly. The crowd gasped. Arcturus's spell should have shattered any ordinary defense. Interesting, Arcturus said, a smirk playing on his lips. But parlor tricks won't save you. He began chanting, his voice low and rhythmic. The ground beneath Kael's feet trembled, then erupted in spikes of earth and stone. Kael leaped backward, his movements fluid. He'd trained for this. Countless hours in the hidden forest, honing his body and magic. He landed lightly, already summoning his own spell. Mockery Blast. It wasn't a powerful attack in terms of raw force, but it carried the psychic weight of every insult he'd ever endured. A wave of invisible energy washed over Arcturus. The professor staggered, his concentration broken. For a moment, his confident mask slipped, replaced by a flicker of something ugly. Rage, perhaps, or fear. You dare, he snarled. You think your petty emotions can match true power? Power isn't just about mana cores, Kael said, his voice modulated by a subtle enchantment on his mask to sound deeper, older. It's about what you do with what you're given. Arcturus laughed, but it was brittle, spoken like a true cripple. The word hung in the air. Cripple. It echoed in Kael's mind, stirring memories. The failed mana test, the duel where he was beaten bloody, the expulsion trial. He felt a stronger surge of energy this time. His Martyr's reversal was responding to the direct, public humiliation. He could almost see the experience points accumulating, a hidden counter ticking upward. You know, don't you? Kael said softly, so only Arcturus could hear as they circled each other. Headmaster Vance told you who I am. Arcturus's eyes narrowed. He might have mentioned something. The Academy's greatest disappointment, pretending to be a hero. It's pathetic, really. All those years of being laughed at, and now you hide behind a mask. Do you think that changes what you are? More laughter from the crowd. They couldn't hear the conversation, but they saw Arcturus's disdain, his mocking posture. Kael's power grew. He could feel it. A reservoir of strength building with every scornful glance, every whispered joke in the stands. Let's show them, Arcturus said loudly, addressing the crowd now. Let's show everyone what happens when a cripple tries to play with the real mages. He raised his hands high, gathering mana in a visible vortex of light. Grand Cataclysm. It was a spell far beyond tournament limits, dangerous and flashy. The referees stirred, but hesitated. Arcturus was a professor, after all. Kael didn't panic. He closed his eyes for a second, reaching inward. Karma's Ledger. The skill activated, a mental tome flipping open. Pages filled with entries. Every insult, every injustice he'd suffered. And among them, entries for Arcturus Thorn, not just as a bystander to Kael's humiliation, but as a perpetrator of his own shames. He found it, a memory, recorded by the ledger's magic. Arcturus, years ago, in a hidden chamber, using forbidden blood magic to enhance his own power. A secret that would ruin his career, his reputation. As the grand cataclysm spell gathered, threatening to engulf the arena, Kael spoke. His voice, still masked, carried across the silence that had fallen. Arcturus Thorn, you speak of cripples and shame. But what of your own? What of the blood ritual in the North Tower 3 years ago? The one where you sacrificed a lesser spirit to boost your mana core. Arcturus froze. The vortex of mana wavered. What? How do you? His face went pale. Karma's ledger remembers all, Kael said. He projected the memory, not visually, but as a psychic impression that swept through the arena. The crowd felt it. The dark room, the chanting, the sense of something forbidden and cruel. Gasps turned to shouts of outrage. Lies. Arcturus screamed, but his voice trembled. The spell collapsed, mana dissipating harmlessly. He stumbled back, his confidence shattered. You have no proof. But the psychic impression had been too vivid, too real to deny. The referees converged. Professor Thorn, is this true? The head referee demanded. Arcturus looked from the referees to the crowd, their faces now hostile. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The humiliation was public, absolute. He had tried to shame the martyr, and instead, his own darkest secret was exposed for thousands to see. Kael felt a massive surge of power. The reversal was complete. Arcturus's attempt to humiliate him had backfired spectacularly, and the public witnessing of that reversal, the crowd's shift from mockery to condemnation of Arcturus, triggered an exponential gain. His level spiked. New notifications flashed in his mind. Skill unlocked. Public retribution. Stat boost. Plus 20 to wisdom. Plus 15 to charisma. But he pushed them aside, focusing on the moment. Yield, Kael said quietly. Arcturus sank to his knees, his head bowed. I yield. The words were barely a whisper, but the referees heard. The martyr wins by forfeit, the announcer declared. The crowd was in an uproar. Some cheered for the martyr's victory and the exposure of corruption. Others were confused, angry at the disruption. Kael turned to leave the arena, his heart pounding. He'd won. He was in the finals. But as he reached the tunnel entrance, a voice cut through the noise. Wait. It was Headmaster Vance. He stood in the dignitary box, his figure imposing in his formal robes. He raised a hand, and magic amplified his voice to silence the crowd. Before we proceed, there is a matter that must be addressed. This tournament is meant to showcase the best of our academy, but it seems we have an imposter among us. Kael stopped, his back to Vance. He knew what was coming. The so-called martyr, Vance continued, his tone dripping with false regret. A mysterious fighter who has defeated some of our brightest. But mystery is not a virtue when it hides deception. I have discovered his true identity. He paused, letting the tension build. The martyr is none other than Kael, the expelled student. The cripple we all remember. Silence. Then, the arena erupted. Shouts of disbelief, cries of outrage, waves of laughter. The sound washed over Kael, a physical force. He could feel every eye on him, every pointed finger. The mask felt suddenly heavy, not a protection but a lie. Slowly, he reached up and removed it, letting it fall to the ground with a soft clatter. He turned to face the crowd. His face, pale, with the faint scars of old beatings, the determined set of his jaw, was now visible to all. The boy they had mocked, the student they had expelled, standing in the semi-finals of their grand tournament. The humiliation was absolute, more intense than anything he'd ever experienced. Because it wasn't just mockery now, it was betrayal, confusion, rage. They had cheered for him, some of them, and now they felt fooled. The boos grew louder, a cacophony of scorn. And with it, Kael's power soared. It was like a dam breaking. Experience points flooded in. His stats skyrocketed, strength, agility, intelligence, all climbing to levels he'd only dreamed of. New skills unlocked in a cascade. Collective scorn absorption, identity revelation boost, crowd's judgment conversion. His body thrummed with energy, so much that the air around him crackled with visible sparks of mana. He stood straight, meeting Vance's gaze across the arena. The headmaster looked satisfied, a cruel smile on his lips. He had made good on his threat. He had exposed Kael, thinking it would break him, or at least control him. But Kael felt no fear. Only a cold, clear certainty. The humiliation was fuel. The crowd's shock and anger were kindling for the fire of his power. He had endured years of this. What was one more moment, amplified by thousands? He raised a hand, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. The gesture silenced the crowd momentarily. "You're right, Headmaster," Kael said, his voice now his own, no longer masked. It carried, not through magic, but through the sheer force of his presence. "I am Kael, the cripple, the expelled, and now, I am in your finals." He turned and walked into the tunnel, leaving the arena in stunned silence behind him. The mask lay forgotten on the ground, a symbol of a past he no longer needed. The boy was gone. The martyr was gone. All that remained was Kael, power burning in his veins, and a final battle to come. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wall of sound that pressed against Kael's ears as he stood in the dim tunnel leading to the grand arena. He could feel the vibrations through the stone floor, each jeer and chant a familiar sting that now sparked not pain, but power. His identity was laid bare. No more mask, no more mystery. He was Kael, the Academy's cripple, and the entire student body, faculty, and spectators beyond knew it. He took a slow breath, the air cool and damp in the passageway. The scent of ozone from recent magical displays lingered, mixed with the faint, metallic tang of blood from earlier matches. Around him, the walls were rough-hewn granite, etched with ancient runes that glowed with a soft blue light, casting long shadows that danced with the distant echoes of the crowd. He adjusted the simple gray tunic and trousers he wore. No armor, no embellishments. Just the clothes of an expelled student, now his battle gear. His hands, calloused from months of secret training in the forest, clenched at his sides. In his mind, the martyr's reversal hummed like a live wire. With each boo, each shouted insult from the stands, he could feel the experience points flooding in, a torrent that made his mana core, once weak and flickering, burn with an intensity he'd never known. He closed his eyes, focusing inward. His stats glowed in his mental vision, strength, agility, mana capacity, all skyrocketing. The public shame was a fuel, and the arena was a furnace. He smiled faintly, a bitter twist of his lips. All those years of humiliation, all those moments of being laughed at in class, beaten in duels, denounced at the expulsion trial, they had led here. To this tunnel, to this moment. He was stronger than ever, and the crowd didn't even realize they were the ones powering him up. A voice cut through the noise, sharp and condescending. "Nervous, cripple? You should be." Kael opened his eyes to see Headmaster Vance standing at the tunnel's entrance, silhouetted against the bright light of the arena beyond. The headmaster's robes were immaculate, deep purple with silver trim, and his expression was a mask of smug superiority. Behind him, Kael could glimpse the packed stands, thousands of faces turned toward them, their shouts a chaotic symphony of disdain. "I'm not nervous," Kael said, his voice steady. He met Vance's gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm grateful. Every insult out there is making me stronger. You taught me that, Headmaster." Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Don't get ahead of yourself, boy. Your little ability is impressive, I'll grant you that. But it has limits. And in the finals, you'll face someone who exists beyond limits." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Kael could hear. "My champion, Valerius Ironheart. A legendary warrior, undefeated in 100 battles. He's been training for this moment since before you were born. Your shame-fueled tricks won't save you." Kael felt a flicker of doubt, but he pushed it down. The martyr's reversal surged in response to Vance's taunt, granting a small boost to his willpower stat. He could see the numbers tick up in his mind's eye. "We'll see," he said simply. Vance chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, we will. And when you lose, when Valerius breaks you in front of everyone, remember this. I offered you a deal. You could have been my weapon, Kael. Instead, you chose to be a spectacle. A pathetic, broken spectacle." He turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, the crowd's been chanting for your defeat all morning. They can't wait to see the cripple fall one last time. Enjoy the boost while it lasts." With that, Vance strode into the arena, raising his arms to the roaring crowd. The noise swelled, and Kael could pick out the chants now. Cripple out, cripple out. Over and over, a rhythmic drumbeat of scorn. He closed his eyes again, letting the words wash over him. Each syllable was a spark, igniting the martyr's reversal. His level jumped, level 42, level 43. Skills unlocked in his mind. Collective mockery barrage, a technique that could channel the crowd's disdain into a physical attack and shame-fueled strike. A blow that grew stronger with every insult he'd endured. He memorized them, feeling the knowledge settle into his muscles like second nature. He stepped out of the tunnel, into the blinding light of the arena. The grand arena was a colossal structure, with tiers of stone seats rising high into the sky, packed with students in academy robes, nobles in finery, and commoners who'd paid dearly for a glimpse of the tournament. Magical screens floated overhead, projecting close-ups of the combatants. The ground was smooth, white marble, scarred from previous battles, and at the center stood a raised platform where the duels took place. Overhead, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue, but the air crackled with anticipation and latent magic. As Kael walked toward the platform, the boos intensified. He could see faces in the crowd, former classmates, like Alara, a noble scion who'd once tripped him in the hall, now sneering, Professor Thorn, who he'd defeated in the semifinals, glaring with pure hatred, and hundreds of others, their expressions a mix of curiosity, disgust, and glee at his impending humiliation. He kept his head high, his steps measured. Inside, though, his heart pounded. This was it. The finals. All his secret training, all his endured shame, led to this moment. He reached the platform and climbed the steps. On the opposite side, his opponent awaited. Valerius Ironheart was a mountain of a man, easily 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and muscles that strained against his polished steel armor. He wore no helmet, revealing a face etched with scars and a beard of iron gray. His eyes were cold, calculating, and held no malice, just the detached focus of a seasoned warrior. In his hands, he held a massive two-handed sword, its blade gleaming with enchanted runes that pulsed with a faint red light. He didn't speak, didn't taunt. He simply watched Kael, his presence an oppressive weight. Headmaster Vance's voice boomed through the arena, amplified by magic. Ladies and gentlemen, students and honored guests, welcome to the finals of the Arcane Academy Grand Tournament. On one side, we have Valerius Ironheart, undefeated champion, slayer of beasts, and master of combat. On the other, he paused, letting the crowd's jeers swell. Kael, the expelled cripple, who somehow stumbled his way here through trickery and shame. Let the duel begin. The crowd erupted, their chants of cripple out growing deafening. Kael stood his ground, feeling the martyr's reversal drink in the disdain. His stats glowed, level 45 now. He activated Karma's ledger, in his mind, scanning Valerius. The skill revealed flashes, Valerius's history, his battles, his loyalty to Headmaster Vance. But no hidden shames, no weaknesses to exploit. Valerius was exactly what he appeared, a warrior of pure skill and strength, unburdened by deceit. Kael's breath hitched. This wouldn't be like the other matches. He couldn't rely on exposing secrets. He'd have to win through raw power, powered by the very humiliation surrounding him. Valerius moved first, a blur of motion despite his size. He closed the distance in seconds, his sword sweeping in a wide arc aimed at Kael's torso. Kael reacted on instinct, ducking and rolling to the side. The blade whistled past, missing by inches, and struck the marble platform with a thunderous crack, sending chips of stone flying. The crowd gasped, then cheered for Valerius. Kael sprang to his feet, his heart racing. He could feel the martyr's reversal working. Each cheer for his opponent, each shout of, "Kill him," added to his experience. He focused, channeling the energy into shame-fueled strike. His fists glowed with a pale blue light, and he lunged forward, aiming a punch at Valerius's armored chest. Valerius didn't bother to block. The punch landed, and a shockwave of force erupted, but Valerius barely staggered. He looked down at Kael, his expression unchanged. "Is that all?" he rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. Before Kael could respond, Valerius backhanded him with a gauntlet fist. The blow connected with Kael's jaw, sending him sprawling across the platform. Pain exploded in his head, and he tasted blood. The crowd roared with laughter and approval. Kael pushed himself up, his vision swimming. The Martyr's reversal surged, level 46. He could feel the power mending his injuries, strengthening his bones. He spat blood onto the marble, his eyes narrowing. "You hit hard," Kael said, wiping his mouth. "But I've been hit harder. By people who actually meant it." Valerius didn't reply. He advanced again, his sword held ready. Kael knew he couldn't match strength directly. He had to use speed, use the skills he'd unlocked. He activated Collective Mockery Barrage, drawing on the crowd's jeers. The air around him shimmered, and a wave of invisible force shot toward Valerius. A concentrated blast of the arena's scorn. Valerius raised his sword, and the runes on the blade flared red. The wave struck, but instead of harming him, it seemed to dissipate against the enchantments. Valerius didn't even flinch. "Your tricks are meaningless," he said, his tone flat. "True power doesn't come from the weakness of others." He swung his sword again, and this time Kael wasn't fast enough. The blade grazed his side, slicing through his tunic and drawing a line of fire across his ribs. Kael cried out, stumbling back. The crowd's cheers grew louder, a cacophony of delight at his pain. He could feel the Martyr's reversal, working overtime, level 47, level 48. His wounds knit together, but slower now. Valerius was too strong, too skilled. Kael was being overwhelmed. He glanced at the stands, at the sea of faces screaming for his defeat. For a moment, doubt threatened to consume him. What if Vance was right? What if this was his limit? But then he remembered. The expulsion trial, the daily humiliations, the forest training. He hadn't come this far to break now. He straightened, ignoring the pain. The crowd's boos were music to his ears, fueling him further. Valerius pressed the attack, his sword a whirlwind of steel. Kael dodged and weaved, using pain absorption to lessen the blows he couldn't avoid. Each hit sent shocks through his body, but each also fed his power. He was a sponge, soaking in the damage and the disdain, converting it into strength. He landed a few more shame-fueled strikes, but they did little more than scratch Valerius's armor. The duel dragged on, minutes feeling like hours. Kael was battered, bruised, but still standing. Valerius, meanwhile, showed no sign of fatigue. His movements were precise, relentless. The crowd's chants shifted, from cripple out to finish him. They were growing impatient, wanting a quick end. Headmaster Vance watched from his private box, a satisfied smile on his face. He leaned over to a nearby professor. "See? The cripple's ability has limits. Valerius will break him soon." On the platform, Kael realized he needed a new approach. He couldn't win through direct combat. He had to use the arena itself, use the very humiliation that powered him. He backed toward the edge of the platform, drawing Valerius after him. The crowd leaned forward, sensing a climax. "Running won't save you," Valerius said, his sword poised for a final strike. Kael stopped at the edge, the drop to the arena floor a good 10 feet below. He looked Valerius in the eye. "I'm not running," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "I'm showing you what true power looks like." He raised his hands, and for the first time, he didn't channel the Martyr's reversal into a skill. Instead, he let it flood out, a visible aura of blue light erupting from his body. The crowd fell silent, stunned. Kael's stats blazed in his mind. Level 50, a milestone he'd never dreamed of reaching. The power was intoxicating, a river of energy born from years of shame. "This," Kael shouted, his voice echoing, "is what your mockery has made me." He slammed his hands onto the platform, and the marble cracked, fissures radiating out from his touch. The collective mockery barrage merged with shame-fueled strike, and a shockwave of force exploded outward, not aimed at Valerius, but at the very foundation of the arena. The ground trembled, and the crowd screamed in panic. Valerius staggered, caught off balance by the tremor. In that moment of distraction, Kael lunged. He didn't use a fancy skill, just raw, enhanced strength, fueled by every insult he'd ever endured. He tackled Valerius around the waist, driving him backward toward the edge. Valerius grunted, trying to shove him off, but Kael held on, his fingers digging into the armor seams. They teetered on the brink. The crowd shouts a distant roar in Kael's ears. He could see Valerius's cold eyes widen slightly, the first hint of surprise. "You're strong," Kael gasped, his muscles burning. "But I've carried the weight of this entire academy's scorn. And now, I'm giving it back." With a final heave, he pushed, and Valerius toppled over the edge, crashing to the arena floor below with a metallic clang. The impact shook the ground, and Valerius lay still, unmoving. Silence. Then, a slow, building murmur from the crowd. They stared, disbelieving. Kael stood at the edge of the platform, breathing heavily, blood trickling from cuts on his face and arms. He looked down at Valerius, then up at the stands. The boos had stopped. Now, there was only shock and a dawning realization. Headmaster Vance's voice cut through the quiet, sharp with fury. "Impossible. Valerius, get up." But Valerius didn't move. Medics rushed onto the arena floor, checking him. After a moment, one looked up and shook his head. Valerius was unconscious, defeated. Kael turned to face Vance's box. His body ached, his power was draining fast, but he felt a fierce triumph. He had won. Against all odds, against a legendary warrior, he had won. And the crowd's shame had been his weapon. The chapter ends with Kael standing victorious on the platform, the arena in stunned silence around him. He meets Vance's eyes across the distance, and in that gaze, he sees not just anger, but fear. The finals are over, but the real battle, with the Headmaster himself, is about to begin. The crowd's chants are gone, replaced by a tense, waiting quiet, as Kael prepares for what comes next. The arena was a cauldron of noise and malice. Kael stood at its center, his mask long discarded, his face exposed to the jeering masses. The air crackled with residual mana from his victory over Valerius Ironheart, the legendary champion now lying unconscious at the edge of the platform. Kael's chest heaved with exertion, but his eyes burned with a cold, focused fire. Around him, the stands were a sea of hostile faces. Nobles in silken robes, students in academy uniforms, commoners who had come to witness the spectacle. Their boos and insults washed over him like a physical wave, each word a dagger that should have cut deep. Instead, Kael felt them as fuel. His Martyr's reversal ability hummed within him, a constant, hungry presence. With every shout of cripple or fraud, his experience points ticked upward. The system notifications flashed in his mind's eye, almost too fast to read. Level up? 7879. Skill enhanced. Collective mockery barrage. New skill unlocked. Humiliations echo. He ignored them, focusing on the real prize. Across the arena, in the elevated Headmaster's box, Vance Ironheart watched with a face like carved stone. The man's hands gripped the railing, knuckles white, but his eyes held not fear alone. There was calculation there, a predator assessing its prey. Kael took a step forward, his boots crunching on the shattered remnants of the arena floor. The duel with Valerius had left scars, deep gouges in the stone, patches of scorched earth where fire spells had landed, and a lingering ozone scent from lightning magic. Kael's own body bore the marks, a cut on his cheek, bruises forming along his ribs, his robes torn in places. But the pain was distant, muted by the adrenaline and the steady influx of power from the crowd's disdain. He raised a hand, pointing directly at Headmaster Vance. "Vance Ironheart." Kael's voice cut through the noise, amplified by a touch of mana. It was steady, stronger than he had ever allowed it to sound in this place. "You orchestrated my humiliation. You used me as a pawn in your schemes. I demand a duel, here and now, to settle this." The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into fresh uproar. Some laughed, others shouted in outrage. How dare he challenge the Headmaster? A noblewoman sneered from the front row. "The cripple has lost his mind after that lucky win," a student muttered to his friend. Kael absorbed it all, feeling his mana core pulse with renewed vigor. Experience plus 500 from public ridicule. The system chimed. He almost smiled. In the Headmaster's box, Vance did not move immediately. He leaned over to whisper to an aide, who scurried away. Then, with deliberate slowness, he straightened his robes, deep blue embroidered with silver runes, symbols of his authority. He stepped to the edge of the box, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before settling on Kael. "Kael," he said, his voice magically projected to fill the arena. It was smooth, patronizing. "You have shown remarkable resilience. But this foolishness ends now. You are a student. No, an expelled student, and I am the headmaster of the Arcane Academy. There will be no duel. Kael's jaw tightened. He had expected this. Vance would try to dismiss him, to maintain control through protocol and status. But Kael had planned for it. He reached into the mental ledger that had become his constant companion, Karma's ledger, the skill that recorded every injustice against him. It glowed in his mind, pages filled with names, dates, and insults. He focused on Vance's entries, pulling one to the forefront. On the 3rd of Frostfall, during my expulsion trial, Kael said, his voice ringing clear. You declared before thousands that I was a stain on the Academy's honor, that my weak mana core made me unfit to walk these halls. Yet, your private journals, which I accessed through a skill unlocked from that very humiliation, reveal you knew about my Martyr's reversal ability from the start. You wrote, and I quote, "The boy's curse could be our greatest weapon. We must stoke the flames of his shame to forge him into something useful." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vance's composure cracked, a flicker of anger crossing his face. "Lies," he snapped. "You dare spread falsehoods to tarnish my name? Is it a lie?" Kael pressed, taking another step forward. The arena floor seemed to tremble beneath him, not from magic, but from the weight of the moment. "What about the funds you diverted from student scholarships to bribe officials at rival academies? Or the forbidden artifacts you've hidden in the academy vaults? Karma's ledger doesn't just record insults, it reveals truths. And I have them all." He could see the uncertainty in the crowd now. The jeers had softened, replaced by murmurs of doubt. A professor in the stands stood up, her face pale. "Headmaster, is this true?" she called out, her voice trembling. Vance's eyes narrowed. He knew he was losing the narrative. With a sharp gesture, he signaled to the guards stationed around the arena. "Seize him. This delusional cripple is spreading slander to cover his own failures." But Kael was ready. As the guards, armored in enchanted plate, staves at the ready, moved toward him, he tapped into the power boiling inside him. The crowd's renewed hostility was a gift. He felt the energy coalesce, a storm of shame and anger that he could shape. "Collective mockery barrage," he shouted, raising both hands. The skill activated. Visible waves of distorted air shot out from Kael, not aimed at the guards, but at the crowd itself. It was a psychological attack, crafted from the very insults they had hurled at him. Echoes of their own voices bounced back at them. "Worthless. Disgrace. You'll never amount to anything." The effect was immediate. People clutched their heads, some crying out in shock as their own cruelty was reflected back. The guards staggered, their advance halted by the psychic onslaught. Kael didn't wait. He sprinted toward the headmaster's box, his movements enhanced by the stats he had accumulated over years of humiliation. Agility boost from tripping in front of classmates, strength from carrying heavy loads as punishment, endurance from enduring endless taunts. It all flowed through him. He leaped, using a shattered pillar as a springboard, and landed on the lower tier of the stands, then bounded upward toward the box. Vance watched him come, no longer pretending calm. He raised his own hands, intricate spell circles forming in the air around him. "You think your petty tricks can match true arcane mastery?" he snarled. "I am a master of the 7th circle. Let me show you the power you were never meant to have." Dark mana swirled around Vance, coalescing into jagged shards of shadow. He thrust his palms forward, and the shards shot toward Kael like black lightning. Kael didn't dodge. Instead, he leaned into the attack, calling on another skill, Shame-Fueled Strike. It was a technique he had honed in the hidden forest, converting humiliation into offensive force. As the shadow shards struck him, tearing through his robes and biting into his skin, he didn't cry out. He embraced the pain, the public spectacle of his suffering. The crowd's horrified gasps were music to his ability. Experience plus 1,000 from severe public humiliation, skill enhanced, pain absorption. The system notifications flashed. Kael gritted his teeth, feeling the dark mana dissipate as his body absorbed it, converting it into raw power. His wounds knit themselves closed, leaving faint scars that glowed with residual energy. He landed on the railing of the headmaster's box, facing Vance across a few feet of empty space. "You see," Kael said, his voice low but carrying. "Every time you try to break me, you only make me stronger. That's the irony of your plan, Headmaster. You wanted a weapon forged from shame, but you never considered it might turn on you. Vance's face twisted in rage. He cast another spell, this time a binding hex meant to paralyze. Purple tendrils of magic lashed out, wrapping around Kael's limbs. Kael struggled, feeling the magic sap his strength. The crowd, recovering from the barrage, began to cheer for Vance. "Finish him, Headmaster," someone yelled. "Show the cripple his place." The words were like kindling to a fire. Kael's Martyr's reversal surged, breaking the hex with a burst of golden light. He stumbled forward, closing the distance between them. Vance retreated a step, his confidence wavering. He was a powerful mage, but his strength lay in preparation and authority, not in close-quarters combat against someone who thrived on adversity. "You're a monster of your own making," Kael whispered, now within arm's reach. "And I'm here to balance the ledger." He didn't use a flashy spell. Instead, he drew on the simplest, most fundamental skill he had unlocked, injustice retribution. It was a direct channeling of all the unfairness he had endured, the failed mana tests, the public duels, the expulsion trial. He focused it into a single punch, his fist glowing with a soft, white light. Vance tried to block with a barrier spell, but Kael's strike shattered it like glass. The punch connected with Vance's jaw. There was a crack, not just of bone, but of something deeper, the sound of authority breaking. Vance staggered back, blood trickling from his lip, his eyes wide with shock and pain. He collapsed into his ornate chair, gasping for breath. The arena was utterly silent. No one booed. No one cheered. They simply stared, unable to process what they had witnessed. The Headmaster, the pinnacle of their world, had been struck down by the boy they had mocked for years. Kael stood over him, breathing heavily. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake, but also a profound sense of clarity. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces filled with awe, fear, and confusion. "This ends now," he said, his voice firm. "The corruption, the lies, the cruelty, it ends. I demand a proper duel, Vance. Not as headmaster and student, but as two people who have wronged each other. Here, in this arena, with everyone watching. Or will you hide behind your title again?" Vance wiped the blood from his mouth, his gaze darting around as if seeking an escape. But there was none. The guards were still reeling from the collective mockery barrage, and the crowd's allegiance had shifted. He saw it in their eyes. Doubt had turned to curiosity, and curiosity to a hungry demand for resolution. Slowly, painfully, Vance pushed himself to his feet. He straightened his robes once more, though the gesture now seemed pathetic. "Very well," he said, his voice hoarse. "A duel. But know this, Kael, I will not hold back. And when I win, you will be erased from history." Kael nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. "I wouldn't have it any other way." He stepped back, giving Vance space to descend to the arena floor. As the Headmaster made his way down the stairs, moving with deliberate, shaky steps, Kael turned to face the crowd again. He saw familiar faces among them, former classmates who had tormented him, professors who had condescended, even the bully from his first duel. Their expressions were unreadable, a mix of shame and fascination. In that moment, Kael realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about forcing this institution to confront its own darkness. And as Vance took his place opposite him on the battered arena floor, Kael knew the real battle was just beginning. The physical duel would be fierce, but the psychological war, the war against the shame that had defined him, was already won. He raised his hands, mana crackling around his fingertips, ready to draw on every ounce of power he had gained from years of humiliation. The crowd held its breath, waiting, and in the stillness, Kael felt a strange peace. No matter what happened next, he was no longer the Academy's crippled prodigy. He was Kael, and his strength was his own. The arena floor, still scarred from Kael's battle with Valerius Ironheart, now felt like a stage for the ultimate confrontation. Dust swirled in the magical light filtering through the Grand Colosseum's domed ceiling, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the two figures standing at its center. Kael, his mask long discarded after his identity was exposed, faced Headmaster Vance with a calm that belied the storm raging within him. His simple tunic was torn and stained with sweat and blood, but his posture was erect, unbroken by years of humiliation. Across from him, Vance stood in his ornate robes of office, a silver-tipped staff in hand, his expression a mask of cold calculation that barely concealed the fury simmering beneath. So, the cripple thinks he can challenge the master of this academy. Vance's voice boomed, amplified by magic to echo through the stands. You were always a tool, Kael. A weapon I forged through shame. Did you really believe your little rebellion was your own idea? Kael didn't flinch. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon him. Nobles in their velvet boxes, students crammed into stone benches, professors watching from balconies. The air crackled with anticipation and disdain. Whispers and jeers drifted down like poisoned rain. Pathetic, he'll be crushed. A cripple versus the headmaster. This is a joke. Each word was a spark that ignited the furnace of his martyr's reversal. Deep inside, he felt the familiar surge, a warm, pulsing energy that spread through his mana core, once weak, but now a reservoir of immense power. His stats, invisible to others, glowed in his mind's eye. Strength, agility, mana capacity, all climbing exponentially with every insult. I know what you did, Kael replied, his voice steady, carrying without need for amplification. You orchestrated my humiliation from the start. The failed tests, the public duels, the expulsion trial, all to fuel my ability. You wanted a weapon to dominate other academies. But you forgot one thing. Weapons can turn on their makers. Vance's lips curled into a sneer. Brave words for someone who's about to learn his place again. He raised his staff, and dark tendrils of magic snaked from its tip, coiling around him like serpents. The air grew heavy, charged with a malevolent energy that made the crowd gasp. Behold the power you could have wielded at my side. With a swift motion, Vance unleashed his spell. Amplified ridicule, he shouted. The dark magic shot upward, spreading like a cloud over the arena. It latched onto the spectators' emotions, magnifying their mockery and disdain. Suddenly, the jeers grew louder, more vicious. Cripple. Failure. Disgrace. The words became a cacophony, a psychic assault that pressed down on Kael. He staggered, feeling the weight of collective scorn like a physical blow. His vision blurred for a moment, and he could see Vance smiling, confident in his manipulation. But Kael had endured worse. He closed his eyes, drawing on the very humiliation being weaponized against him. Martyr's reversal, he whispered inwardly. The ability activated, a familiar rush of power flooding his veins. The public ridicule, now amplified by Vance's dark magic, became pure fuel. His stats skyrocketed, godlike levels he'd never imagined. Mana surged through him, visible as a golden aura that pushed back the dark tendrils. He stood straighter, his eyes snapping open with a fierce light. Is that all you have? Kael taunted, his voice cutting through the noise. I've lived with this for years. Your magic just makes me stronger. Vance's confidence wavered. He struck again, this time with Shame Bolt, a spell designed to paralyze with memories of past failures. A bolt of shadowy energy shot toward Kael. Instead of dodging, Kael raised a hand. Shame Shield, he intoned. A translucent barrier formed, woven from the very essence of his endured humiliations. The bolt struck it and dissipated, absorbed into the shield, which glowed brighter. Kael felt another surge, his defense stat climbing. You can't win with tricks born of my own design. Vance roared, charging forward. His staff became a blur as he cast rapid-fire spells, mockery chains to bind, insecurity blast to disorient. Kael moved with preternatural speed, his agility boosted to peak levels. He weaved through the attacks, each near miss fueling his pain absorption skill. When a chain grazed his arm, he didn't flinch. Instead, he converted the sting into raw power. The duel became a dance of light and shadow. Vance was a master of dark magic, his movements precise, his spells deadly. But Kael was something more, a living embodiment of resilience. He didn't just counter, he turned every attack into growth. When Vance unleashed Collective Jeer Wave, a sonic blast fueled by crowd disdain, Kael met it with Mockery Blast, a skill he'd unlocked long ago. Golden energy clashed with dark, creating a shockwave that rattled the arena. Spectators covered their ears, their jeers momentarily silenced by awe. Enough! Vance snarled, his patience fraying. He channeled his mana into a final, desperate spell. Ultimate Humiliation. The dark magic coalesced into a massive, shadowy fist that descended toward Kael, aiming to crush him physically and symbolically. The crowd held its breath, many believing this was the end. Kael looked up, calm. He had been waiting for this moment. All the shame, all the pain, it had led here. He raised both hands, not in defense, but in invocation. Karma's ledger, he called out. The skill activated, and a spectral book materialized above him, its pages glowing with recorded injustices. As the shadow fist descended, Kael didn't block it. Instead, he let it strike him. The impact was thunderous. Dust billowed, obscuring the arena. For a long second, there was silence. Then, from within the cloud, a golden light erupted. Kael stood unharmed, the shadow fist dissolving around him. His martyr's reversal had reached its zenith. Godlike stats, strength, intelligence, endurance, flared within him, making him feel invincible. He stepped forward, the dust clearing to reveal Vance panting, his mana nearly depleted. Your turn, Kael said softly. He didn't need grand spells. He simply moved, faster than sight, and appeared before Vance. With a single, controlled strike, shame-fueled strike, he tapped Vance's chest. It wasn't a brutal blow, but it carried the weight of every humiliation Kael had endured. Vance crumpled, his staff clattering to the ground, his dark magic dissipating like smoke. As Vance lay defeated, Kael didn't gloat. He turned to the crowd, their jeers now muted into stunned silence. He raised the Karma's ledger, its pages flipping rapidly. You all witnessed my shame, he announced, his voice ringing clear. Now witness the truth. He channeled mana into the ledger, and it projected images and words into the air, illusions visible to everyone. Scenes played out. Vance whispering orders to professors to humiliate Kael, records of manipulated expulsion trials, plans to use Kael's powered-up form against rival academies. The headmaster's schemes, laid bare for all to see. Gasps turned to murmurs, then to roars of outrage. Traitor, someone shouted. He used us, cried another. The crowd's jeers, once directed at Kael, now turned toward Vance. The headmaster tried to rise, to protest, but guards, previously loyal to him, hesitated, their faces pale with shock. Kael walked over to Vance, looking down at the broken man. You wanted a weapon, he said, his tone devoid of malice. You got one, but weapons have consciences. He gestured to the guards. Arrest him, for corruption, manipulation, and abuse of power. The guards moved slowly at first, then with resolve. They hauled Vance to his feet, his robes disheveled, his authority shattered. As he was led away, he shot Kael a venomous look, but it was met with only pity. The crowd watched, their awe palpable. The cripple had not just won a duel. He had exposed the rot at the Academy's heart. Kael stood alone in the arena center, the golden aura fading as his stats stabilized at their new, godlike plateau. He felt no triumph, only a weary satisfaction. The years of humiliation had forged him into this, a force that could topple tyrants. He looked up at the stands, seeing faces once full of mockery now filled with respect, even fear. But he didn't smile. His journey was far from over. As the noise settled, a professor approached, offering reinstatement and honors. Kael shook his head. I don't need your academy's validation anymore, he said. I have my own path. He turned and walked toward the exit, the crowd parting silently. Behind him, whispers began, legends in the making. The cripple who turned shame into strength, who defeated the headmaster and cleansed the academy. Stepping into the sunlight outside the Colosseum, Kael took a deep breath. The weight of the past felt lighter, but the future beckoned with new challenges. He knew that every insult, every hardship to come, would only make him stronger. For now, he had reclaimed his honor, but his story was just beginning. The arena was silent, a stark contrast to the roaring chaos of moments before. Kael stood at its center, his breathing steady despite the lingering ache in his muscles. Around him, the shattered remnants of Headmaster Vance's dark magic dissipated like black smoke under the morning sun. The crowd, once a cacophony of jeers and chants for his defeat, now watched in hushed awe, their faces a mosaic of shock, guilt, and newfound respect. Kael's eyes swept across the stands. Students he'd once envied, professors who'd dismissed him as a cripple, nobles who'd spat insults. All were frozen, their gazes fixed on him. He could feel the weight of their stares, but it no longer burned with humiliation. Instead, it settled like a mantle, heavy with the power he'd earned through every public shame. His Martyr's reversal ability hummed within him, a steady pulse of energy that had peaked during the duel, granting him stats he'd only dreamed of. Yet, as the adrenaline faded, he felt no urge to gloat. Only a deep, weary clarity. From the VIP section, Professor Alistair, a stern-faced elder who'd often criticized Kael's lack of potential, stepped forward. His voice, amplified by a minor spell, echoed through the arena. Kael, or should I say, the Martyr, the Academy owes you an apology. We have witnessed today the corruption that festered at our core, and your strength in exposing it. On behalf of the Interim Council, I offer you full reinstatement as a student, with honors and a scholarship to study under our finest mages. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own roles in Kael's torment. Kael closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. Reinstatement. Honors. It was everything he'd once craved: validation, acceptance, a place in this world of power. But as he opened his eyes, he saw not the gleaming towers of the Arcane Academy, but the memory of a younger self, trembling after a failed mana test, the laughter of nobles ringing in his ears. He shook his head slowly, his voice calm but firm. Thank you, Professor, but I decline. The silence deepened. Alistair's brow furrowed. Decline? Kael, think carefully. This is your chance to reclaim what was taken from you. You could become a legend here, a symbol of resilience. Kael smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips. I don't need to reclaim anything. I've already taken back my honor, not through your acceptance, but through my own strength. And as for being a legend, he paused, glancing at the crowd. I think my story will spread regardless. But my place isn't within these walls anymore. He turned, his boots crunching on the arena's cracked stone. As he walked toward the exit, a figure darted from the stands. Lissa, a first-year student he'd once helped with a minor spell, her eyes wide with admiration. Kael, wait, where will you go? He stopped, meeting her gaze. There are others out there like me. People cursed with weak mana cores, or different kinds of shame, who are told they're worthless. I'm going to find them, to help them see that humiliation isn't the end. It can be the fuel for something greater. Lissa's eyes glistened. But you'll be alone. Kael's smile widened. I've been alone before, and I've learned that every challenge, every bit of mockery, only makes me stronger. My Martyr's reversal ensures that. He tapped his chest lightly. This power born from pain, I won't let it be wasted on petty revenge or academy politics. I'll use it to lift others up. As he resumed walking, the crowd began to stir. Whispers spread like wildfire. He's leaving, after all that. What a fool. But Kael ignored them, his focus inward. He could feel the subtle thrum of his abilities. Karma's ledger quietly recording this moment. Shame shield dissipating now that the threat was gone, and the core of Martyr's reversal still pulsing with residual energy from the duel. It was a strange comfort, knowing that even now, as he walked away from the greatest victory of his life, he was still growing stronger with every doubting glance. At the academy gates, a small group had gathered, former bullies he'd defeated in the tournament, their faces pale with remorse. Among them was Rylan, the prodigy son of Headmaster Vance, who'd been exposed for using band enhancers. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. Kael, I'm sorry. For everything. My father's schemes, my own arrogance. He trailed off, unable to meet Kael's eyes. Kael regarded him quietly. In the past, this moment might have filled him with vindictive pleasure. But now, he felt only a distant pity. Your apology is noted, Rylan. But it doesn't change what happened. Use your second chance wisely. Don't let power corrupt you like it did your father. Rylan nodded, tears in his eyes, as Kael pushed open the heavy iron gates. Beyond them, the world stretched out. Rolling hills, distant forests, and roads leading to towns and cities he'd only heard of in lectures. He took a deep breath, the air fresh and free of the Academy's stifling mana currents. As he stepped onto the dirt path, a voice called out from behind. Kael. It was Alara, a professor who'd secretly sympathized with him during his expulsion trial. She hurried over, clutching a small, leather-bound book. "I thought you might want this. It's a journal, empty, to record your travels." And she hesitated, then handed him a pouch that jingled with coins. "A small stipend from the council. For your journey." Kael accepted both, tucking the journal into his pack and the pouch into his pocket. "Thank you, Professor, for believing in me, even when it was dangerous." Alara smiled sadly. "I should have done more, but I'm glad you're choosing this path. The world needs more like you. People who turn pain into purpose." With a final nod, Kael turned and began to walk, the academy shrinking behind him. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows as he moved. For the first time in years, he felt no urgency, no fear of the next humiliation. Instead, there was a quiet anticipation. He knew that out there, in the wider world, there would be new challenges, perhaps bandits on the road, skeptical villagers, or even other mages who'd dismiss him as a wanderer. Each would offer its own form of public shame, and each would feed his martyr's reversal, making him stronger. He walked for hours, the landscape shifting from cultivated fields to wilder terrain. As dusk approached, he found a clearing by a stream and set up a simple camp. Sitting by the fire he'd conjured with a flick of his wrist, a skill he'd unlocked after a particularly harsh demonstration failure, he opened the journal Alara had given him. The first page was blank, waiting for his story. He dipped a quill in ink and began to write. "My name is Kael, once called the cripple of the Arcane Academy. This is not a tale of revenge, but of resilience. I have learned that power is not defined by the strength of one's mana core, but by the strength of one's spirit. And sometimes, the greatest strength is born from the deepest shame." As he wrote, memories flooded back. The first mana test failure, the duel where he was beaten bloody, the expulsion trial that stripped him of everything. Each memory was accompanied by a faint glow from his martyr's reversal, a reminder of the stats and skills he'd gained. He didn't write of those details. Instead, he focused on the lessons: how to endure, how to find strength in weakness, how to turn mockery into motivation. The fire crackled, and he looked up at the stars beginning to dip the twilight sky. In the distance, he could just make out the silhouette of a village, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. Tomorrow, he would head there, offering his help to anyone in need, perhaps a child struggling with magic or an outcast shunned by their community. He knew it wouldn't be easy. His reputation might precede him, or he might face fresh ridicule as a stranger. But that was the point. Every interaction, every moment of doubt or disdain, would be fuel. He closed the journal, setting it aside. Lying back on his bedroll, he let his mind wander. He thought of Headmaster Vance, now imprisoned, his schemes exposed. He thought of the academy, likely embroiled in reforms and scandals. And he thought of himself, no longer a pawn, no longer a victim, but a man with a purpose. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant rain. Kael smiled, a genuine, unburdened expression that lit up his face. For so long, he'd worn masks, the mask of the cripple, the mask of the martyr. Now, he was simply Kael, a traveler with a strange power and a mission to help others. He knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. There would be days when the humiliation felt overwhelming, when the memories of the academy's laughter threatened to drown him. But he also knew that with each public slight, each unfair judgment, his martyr's reversal would activate, granting him new strengths, new skills. It was a cycle he had come to embrace, not as a curse, but as a gift. As sleep began to claim him, he whispered to the night, "Let them mock. Let them doubt. Every insult is a step forward, every shame a building block." His eyes drifted shut, and for the first time in years, he dreamed not of defeat, but of possibilities, of villages healed, of outcasts empowered, of a world where strength was measured not by mana, but by the courage to rise after falling. In the morning, he would wake with the dawn, pack his few belongings, and continue his journey. The legend of Kael, the crippled prodigy who turned humiliation into dominance, would spread far and wide, inspiring some and unsettling others. But for now, under the canopy of stars, he was at peace, knowing that every future challenge would only make him stronger, as he fully embraced the power born from humiliation.